Order, please rise for Mayor Michael Fougere.
Please be seated. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 26th meeting of Regina City Council. Could I have a confirmation of the agenda, please? Motion.
So moved.
Councillor Bryce, a seconder, please. Councillor Murray moves that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The minutes for the meeting of September 28th and October 8th. Motion for that. Councillor Hawkins. Seconder, please. Councillor Young. Any debate on this? Errors or omissions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll begin this evening with public notice, bylaws, and related reports. We have a delegation with respect to the Regina Victory Church. Mr. Doug Rogers. Good evening, Mr. Rogers. If you could identify yourself. We represent you. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm appearing this evening on behalf of Regina Victory Church. My name is Doug Rogers. I'm with Terra Developments, and we are acting as the land development manager for this development. The primary reason for the zoning application in front of you today is to allow our client to build a new home for themselves. Once this is complete, this will be more than just a church, but even more so, a facility that can be used by the entire development. We will return with a discretionary use application in the future, and we will have more plans on the future, on the plans of the church's plans in the future. Our application today allows for a church site of almost 5 acres with the balance to be developed into residential lots. The lots are proposed. The lots that are being proposed are similar to in size and style than is already built in the community, so it will be easily to blend into the community. The only reason that there are residential lots as part of this development is because of the excess land available, and any profits derived from the land development will be put back into the church building itself, and we're estimating that the cost of that building is in the neighborhood of $5 million, so anything we can put back is certainly help. That's really all I have, and any questions I'd be more than happy to answer if I can.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, for your presentation. Other questions of the delegation? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. Welcome, Mr. Rogers. So let's just kind of review a little bit. We had a little bit of a discussion at Planning Commission on this. So one, style of home that will go into the area as proposed.
What style?
What style, please?
Single family. The lots along Padwick are identical in size, so it'll be very similar type of housing.
So it'll match up.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
Now, you're actually not, although we're going to do is potentially do a rezoning here, you're not actually proposing the church at this point in time, but serving notice that a church would be there.
A church would be built. This is just, I believe this is zoned as, can't remember my notes, but that would allow a church.
Yeah.
And then we'll be back with a discretionary use application that will give Planning Commission and this council far more details.
Now, this was a gun range, and so there's some contamination on that property. Would you speak a little bit about how that may clear it up or where that falls?
Yes, Your Worship. We've dealt with the Ministry of Environment and through Stantec Engineering. We've come up with a plan that we, in simplest terms, we're going to take the lead from the gun shells, the contaminated soil, dig a hole. It will be buried and capped, which will be the future parking lot for the church. So it serves 2 purposes, gives them a parking lot and seals off the contamination.
So I want to be clear. So the area that would be cleaned would be the area where the church proper would sit. Would it also include where the houses are currently planned?
And a lot of it would be the church itself, but also some into the residential area. I'm not a shooter, but as you shoot, the shells would go outward, and most would be in the immediate area, moving farther to the north. And
so the contamination would be cleaned to the standard that Sask Environment is requested?
Yes, we filed, again, a corrective action plan with them. It was accepted by them and accepted by city administration as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other questions? Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. Mr. Rogers, thank you for the quick presentation. Are these plans getting to be well known within the community, and is there a high level of acceptance, or are you sensing any sort of issues that might arise?
Thank you, Your Worship. In the package, there is notes from the circulation done by administration. There was 6 or 8 that that had some opposition. There were some that had some questions. 6 or 8, I guess, in our line of business, I always accept to be fairly good. I think when we come forward and tell the whole story, and that will be at the discretion of use time, I think there'll be more acceptance. I think the church will be more than just a church. It'll be a facility that can be used by the community 7 days a week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I have one really follow-up question, and I realize it's maybe slightly premature. When the church is in place, is it anticipated that there'll be adequate parking around the church to accommodate visitors to the church?
The church will certainly meet the parking standards as set by the City of Regina. We're hoping to be a bit more than that as well, but till the design and the site layout has been 100% completed, I can only state that we will, as a minimum, meet the City of Regina standards.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. No other questions? Okay. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks a lot for your presentation. I'm just curious about the environmental aspect of this. Obviously, that's ultimately in the jurisdiction of Sask Environment. I know for contaminated, like abandoned gas stations in Regina, as I understand it, all of the soil that's contaminated has to be removed. Do you know is there specific legislation that speaks to lead from a firing range, or is this a really odd occurrence for them, or is there any other examples you could point to in the province of how this has been handled in a similar way?
Your Worship, I'll have to admit we're moving a bit out of my realm of expertise, and we've leaned on the environmental engineers at Stantec and then the Ministry of the Environment. I don't want to dismiss it, but I don't think it may be as bad as a service station, for instance.
The administration may actually have more information on that too directly.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other questions? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery and I'll consider the report, which is the concept plan and zoning amendment bylaw. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. This is, in fact, an application for a concept plan, zoning bylaw amendment, the land south of Padwick Avenue in Harbor Landing, and it's part of the concept plan for there. If I could have a second, I'll speak to this.
Councillor Young.
Thanks very much. So what you heard, and to be clear, we're not approving a church today, but you're approving a zoning, or would approve zoning where a church would be stationed, and so you need to understand that. These are homes that are proposed for this area, so it's a rezoning to allow those homes. They are, as you heard from the delegation, compatible for the area that's within there. And we also identified a little bit about the environmental, so if you don't mind, Your Worship, I'll ask a question of the staff about the environmental cleanup, and does this meet standard, and is there any concerns for administration regarding this?
Ms. Horlock?
Your Worship, I'll start and then maybe pass it over to Ms. Folk, but as the report indicates, there is a corrective action plan by a qualified engineer that's been accepted by Saskatchewan Ministry of Environment, so we're satisfied that as per the plan and the legislation and authority lies with the Ministry of Environment, so we're satisfied that they're going to meet the environmental regulations.
Perfect. So we had no issues with this at Planning Commission. In fact, we had nobody speak in opposition to this at Planning, so we would seek concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers to the report? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. So again, just the environmental aspect. Is this given the same scrutiny from our point of view as a gas station, an abandoned gas station would have?
Ms. Horlock?
Through Your Worship, we would require the environmental screening, and then because it requires the Ministry of Environment, it's under their jurisdiction, we would rely on the Ministry of Environment, some recommendations on the plan that needs to take place. I'm not sure if Ms. Folk has anything else.
Ms. Folk, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other speakers? Councillor Findura?
Thank you, Worship. Question to administration. On traffic, there's microphones on, get it closer. Okay, traffic, there's one way in and one way out. So my question to administration is there going to be, when a church is built, when the area gets built out, is that enough streets and wide enough streets? There's not going to be difficulties there, Worship?
Well, you know we're not actually approving the church, it's only the land use right now. So.
Just want to ask for the
Ms.
future.
Horlock?
Through your worship, if you look on Appendix A1, you'll see that there is a parcel E, and in the future, Victoria Street would hook up with Padwick Road, which would provide more access in and out
So it's going to be
of that
more-
whole area that's going to be developed. But that will take place when parcel E develops.
And then for emergency vehicles and the width of the road, everything's going to stay the same, no issues there, through your worship?
Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, it's my understanding that it meets all of those requirements for emergency vehicles.
Okay, thank you, worship.
Thank you, Councilor Fundera. Other speakers? Councilor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. This church will be in my ward, and I'm rising in support of it. I think I'm reassured by the comments about parking. I'm reassured by the comments about traffic, both of which are legitimate concerns of residents in Harbor Landing. But I think the real factor here is that this church will be a community facility. We've heard that they'll be providing community spaces. Harbor Landing is desperately in need of community space, a hall, anywhere where anything from a community meeting space to a polling station can be put. Those facilities just aren't available in Harbor Landing right now. In our effort to move towards a more complete community, I think the church will help us achieve those objectives, so I'm in favor of this. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Hawkins. Other speakers? Councilor Donald will close debate.
Thanks very much. I just would like to identify two things. It has been some time, and our guess at Planning Commission was somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 or 8 years since we've had any kind of a church come forward to be built new. We've had some repurposed buildings, but I think that's rather exciting for our community. And the second one, and there's been some discussion on the floor here as well as at planning, is about environmental cleanup. So we're keen to see that one occur, but I just want to identify for your purposes, if you recall, a while back we heard about gas station sites, and there was something in the neighborhood of about 14 or 15 of them. And in my little summation, as I drive around the city, I see that six have been cleaned up. And I think getting another thing cleaned up here for a very good purpose of a church and so on would be wonderful. So hope for concurrence on this.
Thank you, Councilor Donald. We'll close debate on that statement. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll move to Planning Commission and several partial or lane or road closures. Councilor Donald.
That's correct. So an application for a partial road closure, portion of 8th Avenue adjacent to 1360 Broder Street. Please, can I have a seconder?
A seconder, please, for that. Okay. Councilor Murray.
You will note that this is a very small strip of land adjacent to another commercial property. There is no problem in terms of traffic flow or parking or anything along here to solve this, and it's a very small amount of money. We would seek concurrence, please.
Discussion, debate on the issue? Councilor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Just one question. We've seen a lot of these small parcels being sold lately. There's a few of them tonight, and it seems through 2015 we've had a lot of them, maybe not at every meeting, but nearly at every meeting, had some. Is this the norm, or are we just sort of cleaning house? Why is it we have so many of these small parcels being sold as of late? Thanks.
Ms. Harlock?
To your worship, I'll start and then I might pass it over to Mr. Barr. I think it is both issues where people come to us and ask us for these issues, and it's also that we have new software that's identifying things where people are utilizing our property and they're coming to light. So it's a number of those issues that are coming forward. I'd ask Mr. Barr to elaborate if
Mr. Barr?
anything else.
Through your worship, just to add to that, it's also a factor, the demand for land is a factor, and so in many cases it's industrial property and businesses are looking to expand, and they're needing some additional land for their expansion plans.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just, one final question. In general, we're being consistent in how we offer these pieces or how people approach us and the sale price?
Ms. Harlock?
Through you, your worship, at this point when they're smaller pieces of land, we have the $6 a square foot, which is basically 1/3 of the price of a lot. A residential lot is the typical asking price.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Councilor Murray?
Yeah, Your Worship, I think I'm fairly familiar with where this building is located because I've driven by it numerous times, but if I stand corrected, but I believe that the owner of the building that's currently there has been using it as a driveway or an access egress to the property. Is that right?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, I'd have to defer that question to Mr. Barr.
Mr. Barr?
Through your worship, that's correct.
Excellent. So, I mean, it was good of us to allow them to use that property for an extended period of time. It's nice now that they can use their own property and we can have them pay for it. So, thanks, Your Worship.
Other speakers on the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Report 114.
Thanks very
Councilor
much.
Donald.
This is an application for a partial road closure, portion of Riverside Avenue, adjacent to 2540 Garnet Street. If I could have a seconder.
Seconder, please. Councilor Flagel.
Thank you. This is, again, a small portion of land. This is adjacent to residents in this case, and it is not obstructing the flow of traffic. It was never used for the flow of traffic. In fact, I have to be honest with you and tell you I've never heard of Riverside before. So this is a little bit a larger piece of property, but we also saw no problem with this, and the sale of $16,537.50 plus GST is the cost here. Seek concurrence.
Speakers to the report. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councilor O'Donnell.
Application for a road lane closure, undeveloped portion of lane south of 2635 Regina Avenue. Seconder, please.
Seconder for that. Councilor Young.
Consistent theme, so it's another unused portion of land. Availability here is to sell to the landowners that are adjacent. Does not affect traffic. Also seek concurrence, please.
Questions or comments?
Your Worship, just a comment, just by looks of the pictures that we've got from the GIS, it does appear that the adjacent owner's already been using that land anyway. So we've got a car parked on there, maybe a bit of a parking spot or a parking pad, so I think this is good to clean up, this good house cleaning, so happy to see it. Thanks.
Fair point. No other questions or comments? To close, Councilor Down will close debate.
Yeah, and I thought I'd just point out, because it's different than the others here, is that there is a utility parcel in here, so the buildings can't be built on here. So, as Councilor Murray said, they could park or something. We can't build a structure on here, so we still have access. Thanks.
Call the question on report 115. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The last report in this area is Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you again. Application for road closure. This time it's a portion of 28th Avenue at Queen Street. If I could have a seconder.
Seconder, please. Councilor Hawkins.
So this is really a cleanup or a consolidation of some land. We had done some work on this area before. This area was missed, so just an idea of making sure that it's closed, and then there's a parcel there, and it can be remained as a park for the area, although it's not a heavily maintained park. Concurrence, please.
Speakers to the report. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have the bylaws now. Councilor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. These are the public notice bylaws, and I move, seconded by Councilor Fraser, that bylaws number 2015-69, 2015-70, 2015-71, 2015-72, and 2015-73 be introduced and read the first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will now consider the following bylaws after having approved the associated reports. 69, respecting the closure of a portion of the laneway south of 2625 and 2635 Regina Avenue. 1570, respecting the closure of a portion of Riverside Avenue right-of-way. 1571, respecting the proposed rezoning in Harbor Landing. 1572, respecting the closure of a portion of the 28th Avenue right-of-way. And 1573, respecting the closure of a portion of 8th Avenue right-of-way. If there is anyone in the gallery who wishes to address council on any of these bylaws, I would ask you to indicate your interest and await direction from the mayor. There's two.
We do. Okay. Please come forward and state your name, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards. This one shows.
Worship the Mayor and members of City Council. I first heard about I'm speaking in regard to, my name is O'Neill Zuck, a resident of Regina in the ECU Community Association, or ECU Community. I'm speaking in regard to 2015-73. I first heard about the proposed street right-of-way closure on 8th Avenue and Broder Street on October 17th. It was in a Leader Post newspaper. There are problems with this street right-of-way closure. The right-of-way is at the corner of an intersecting street and avenue. The street and avenue are used as a heavy truck route. The right-of-way is on a sharp, turning 90-degree corner. The right-of-way is used regularly as semi-trucks and other large vehicles make turns at the same time as oncoming traffic. The right-of-way is currently used by the right-turning traffic. This is most evident in the wintertime, where right-turning traffic uses the right-of-way to avoid oncoming traffic. A nearby residential neighborhood uses the route for travel, Safety is a concern for the residential and heavy truck users. For these reasons, the right-of-way is needed to accommodate the heavy truck route and residential traffic. In addition, on 8th Avenue, a business one block west of the proposed street closure has expanded their business onto the street to load and unload scrap metal. The traffic is continually dodging metal debris, trucks of all sizes, and people working and walking on the street. 8th Avenue should be widened by an extra couple of lanes to accommodate the business activity. For these reasons, the right-of-way is needed to accommodate the current and future possible widening of 8th Avenue. I ask that City Council and City Planning to consider the issue and then reject the right-of-way closure. I further ask City Council and City Planning to upgrade the right-of-way to formal street standard use to accommodate the heavy traffic and commercial activity in the area. I live in the residential area. I use the avenue and street on a daily basis, and I was adversely affected by one of these little street closures. These have a little bit of an interest to me, especially in my neighborhood. So that's I have to live with that, the pain of that closure. Thank you for your attention, and I'm free to answer any questions.
Councillor Murray?
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Mr. Zuck, for coming forward. Are you aware that that property is currently just a flat gravel surface used as a parking lot?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and that it will continue to be that going forward?
Yes, I do.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Other questions of the delegation? There are none. Thank you very much. You can return. Oh, we do have a question. Councillor Fraser. Be quicker off the draw.
Sorry about that. Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks a lot for your presentation, your concern about this issue. There's no stop sign at this corner right now, is that right?
No, it's just a, I guess the other two, the continuation of this street ends and the continuation of the avenue ends there. So it's just a turning corner.
And is 8th Avenue particularly more narrow than other through streets, other east-west streets?
Well, it's a typical, it's probably about street width. It was probably never initially designed for larger traffic at one time. It seems to be more of just a typical, smaller avenue on some of these residential streets.
Okay, so as I understand your request, you would like the city to keep this land in the hopes that someday it might widen the whole avenue, all the way from Winnipeg to...
Yeah, look, they have some other issues on that street that they probably should be addressed long before this is dealt with, because that is a truck route. It's a heavy traffic route. And there are businesses that do have, you call it business creep. There's one business that they're already at their maximum property line near the street, and now they're working on the street.
Okay.
So,
Okay, I'll be honest, the logistics of actually the city buying out other pieces of property down the street to widen the street seems a bit complicated to me.
That's right.
Is there anything else that comes to mind that might help this issue that the city might do?
Well, one is to halt the advancement of the business encroachment into the street areas.
Okay.
I know everybody likes to expand, and as one person indicated, the property is cheap.
Sure.
That's a disincentive. That's actually, in a way, a certain sense, especially in a more aggressive economy, that's counterproductive in a way, because it sends the wrong message that people want to buy streets and idle land that may be detrimental to others.
Sure. Yeah. We do understand that this particular parcel of land isn't actually street right now, though. There's a curb.
It is identified on city, and the city as a street. It's built as a kind of a curb. Like when you look on the city planning on their website and look to the maps, that's what drew me to this. There is no address for it or legal address for description for it. It is identified as a street. There is no, you can't pull up the title for it. It's part of the street.
Okay.
That's as far as what I saw.
To me, this seems like a bit of an odd situation. But most businesses in Regina front a street, actually, whereas here, again, had this business owned that piece of property all along, we probably wouldn't know the difference. So I'll encourage you to talk to your councillor maybe after the meeting and see what other options might exist to help some of those business
Question, Councillor Fraser?
No question.
Questions, delegations?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. No other questions of delegation? Councillor Bryce?
Thank you. So if a person's already using this space and not paying for it, how do you think we need to deal with that then?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say they have, they're driving on that street just like anybody else. They have no rights to put anything on their building or, barriers or anything like that, because, what happens is I'm making a parallel to 7th Avenue and McDonald Street. We have the same type issue there. What the owner did is put up huge barriers on the very corner, so no one will overrun his traffic quarter. Once you have the private ownership, you will begin the exertion of, they don't want people coming near their property,
So the property that's just west, that's overflowing onto the street, how long has that stuff been overflowing onto the street?
Decades, or a decade for sure, I would say, with my best estimate.
Okay, thank you. We'll maybe ask administration some questions about that.
Thank you for that. Councillor O'Donnell?
Thanks for sharing your thoughts. My question is, so adjacent to, the name of the street escapes me, but there's a number of commercial operations over there. Not at planning nor here tonight have any of those other commercial operations come forward with any concerns about the trucks and so on. How would you answer that, why they're not here?
Well, sometimes it's a little bit of, there was a street closure within 100 feet of my area, 100 feet of my home. And, everything looked okay. It looked, the city can, it's their property, they can maybe sell it if they like. We trust that people are using proper oversight and doing the work, their due diligence. But there was probably not enough, there was a little bit of investigation. I did call in, but I was shut down pretty quick. I was newer to this kind of process. And after it was sold, I realized how dangerous that sale of that street was. It appeared when the lot's sitting quiet, nothing's on it, hey, everything's fine, looks good. It's but boy, when people say it's a different story when people say that's my property. All of a sudden, the story begins to change a bit. They begin to exert their rights on that property. And in my case, the property that was adjacent to my home, it made the property large enough that you had industrial trucks running on the property. It allowed them they couldn't do it on the street, but once it was sold, and once it's sold, you can't go backwards, just like one of the councillor indicates. When it's private property, try to expand a street, you won't get that done. So I'm trying to be proactive rather than reactive, being positive about it as opposed to negative about it. I'm trying to bring this up to, like a well-respected, a well-informed community and see if we can come to some sort of a mitigation. I don't claim to have the answers, but I do know that corner is a very congested corner. Okay. And it's not, I don't take this lightly. I'm taking my time out, my studying out, and it's, really, like I said, it only comes from my experiences, and I've learned it, so it's not too hard for me to come up and speak up.
Okay, thanks for your thought.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other questions of the delegation? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery. I believe there's another person wants to. So Novak, could you identify yourself, who you represent? You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and maybe questions afterwards.
Good evening, Council. This issue before you this evening, there's 5 road right-of-ways that are up for voting. Some very big concerns that I have in regards to this, not necessarily specific to each of these particular parcels of land, because I didn't even pay much attention to this issue, and I'm sure many people do not. The question I have is, what kind of due diligence is being done on behalf of the city in terms of making sure that the public is informed of this, ensuring that people are agreeing with it, if they have issues, like Mr. Zuck had just mentioned, he was just reading the paper and came forward. My concern is that not a lot of people read the paper today anymore. They see it online, and the website, the City of Regina website, isn't updated as often as it needs to be. So this information isn't going to the public as readily as it needs to. I think that we almost need to have a policy in place to advertise it, allow for public feedback for a month or 2 months or something, and ask that councillor of that ward to directly interact with their constituents. couple of other things in regards to this issue. I realize that we have 5 land sales before us this evening that are at, from what I understand, $6 per square foot, which is our City of Regina policy. Later this evening, we have something different. Question becomes, where does the decision become made as to whether we sell for $6 a square foot, $18 a square foot, or far less? Where is the decision being made in terms of if we vote on a bylaw, which is like we're seeing right now, it gives the public an opportunity to present last minute, versus a resolution, which is, as we all know, we have to submit delegations far beforehand. And as according to the province of Saskatchewan, a bylaw is on the permanent record, where a resolution, you have to go back to the minutes of that meeting to find it out. So I think that we need to have some kind of a consistent policy in place, especially for the issue that's coming up in a few minutes here. And the final question I have, and Councillor Fraser had mentioned this, and I don't know if we got a clear answer in terms of these specific properties, but how were they actually brought forward to the city in terms of the sale? Did those businesses, each one of those businesses, or whatever the purchaser is, come to the City of Regina and say, I want to buy that land, and the City of Regina simply said, okay, we'll put it out as a public notice because that's what we're required, but that's all we're going to do, and if nobody comes up and says no, then you can have it. If that's how we're doing it, that's very concerning. I thank you for your time, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Novak, for your presentation. Questions of the delegation? There are none. You can return to the gallery, and we'll continue on with the first reading of the report. I'm going to call a question. I'll call a question on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. Back to the public notice bylaws. I move, seconded by Councillor Flegel, that bylaws number 2015-69, 70, 71, 72, and 73 be read a second time.
Questions on this? Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. So I have some questions based on delegations. So is this a truck route for the 113, report 113? Is it a truck route?
Gaswell?
Through your worship, I believe it's a pickup and delivery route, not a heavy vehicle route.
Okay. And if you look at the appendix on this report, between Atkinson Street and Wallace Street, there is, on 8th Avenue, there is spillage over onto city property, and apparently for 10 years. So what do we do about this? Have we done anything? Have we given any notice that this isn't allowed?
Ms. Horlock?
Through you, Your Worship. This property specifically, we are dealing with this. We have bylaw enforcement, and we're working with the landowner to rectify this situation.
So have we dealt with it? So if this has been going on for 10 years, how long have we been dealing with this owner, and how long do we plan on dealing with them?
Ms. Horlock?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't know the exact specific amount of time that we've been dealing with it, but we have recently been working on this issue as early as this summer to deal with this issue. So it's an ongoing matter that's under investigation.
Thank you. Will this matter be clarified or rectified by the time snow falls? Because if snow crews have to come down this street.
Ms. Horlock?
Through you, Your Worship, I'd have to get back to council on that, as this was not the issue at hand, so I'd have to find out where this matter is at, and I can get back to council on that as an undertaking.
Thank you. So what types of due diligence do we do to ensure the public are aware of pieces of property like this that come forward to council? What's communication, and what do we do as a city to ensure that happens?
Through Your Worship, we do circulate to adjacent landowners within the vicinity. This report goes to the Regina Planning Commission also, which is a public meeting, and then we advertise it as per the bylaw in order to solicit feedback regarding the closure.
Okay, so just to clarify what's in the bylaw about communication, it's ads, whereabouts, and for how long?
Ms. Horlock?
Through Your Worship, it's in the city page, and it's for 2 consecutive weeks.
Okay, thank you. and I believe the question was asked. So how do we find out that these properties, people are interested in buying these properties? You answered, I believe, with the software that we have. Can you elaborate a little bit with that?
Ms. Horlock?
To your worship, I'll start and then I'll ask Mr. Barr. Sometimes people come to us because they do find out that they are on our property, and it's through us finding out that they've been utilizing our property, and then we work with the landowner in order to rectify the situation, whether or not it's that they have to move. If they have some of their property on our property, then we work with them to remove it, or then we look at it whether or not it's a parcel that we could sell to them. In that case, we go through an extensive process of circulation internally to see if the parcel can actually be taken out of our inventory, because we want to make sure that we aren't losing pieces of land that are needed in the future. I'm not sure if Mr. Barr has anything to add.
Mr. Barr?
No.
Through your worship, that's generally summarize it. In some cases, we also would lease the property if that's an option that would work as well. And in some cases, we may do that where there's infrastructure in the ground that we want to protect.
Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Ms. Horlock, you want to add
Through
more?
your worship, I just wanted to correct something. I said it was a 2-week ad. It is only a 1-week ad. I apologize.
Okay. Good. Thanks for that. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. First off, I'm just wondering, could we put the map up on the screen, the map from the report, so people in the audience can actually know what we're talking about? Is that technically possible? If not, if it's going to be a big time suck, then maybe let's not worry about it this time, but maybe that's something to think about for future council meetings. And anyone who's listening in the audience or at home, we're talking about 8th Avenue and Broder Street, if you want to check it out in Google Maps. So I think what our first delegation was talking about, the business creep idea, that's a very important issue. That's happening obviously on 8th Avenue, and we need to address it. I'm not sure that this report is totally connected. I mean, the vast bulk of businesses, nearly 100% of businesses in Regina have frontage. This is an oddity that there's a piece of city land as a gap. So I'm not sure that, I feel like we're dealing with two separate issues here. It's been brought up, but could you please, again, just speak to what is being done about the issue down the street from this particular property?
Ms. Horlock?
To your worship, it's my understanding that we are working with the landowner and bylaw to rectify this situation.
Okay. Is there anything that council might do tonight to help speed up that process, or to help that process along as far as a motion or anything like that, or it's sort of in motion already?
Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, we're handling it as per our standard protocols, and we'll be working, moving it forward.
Okay. I think that is a serious issue, and I would encourage the first delegation to contact your councillor or find out more, because hopefully there is something the city can do about it. As for this, these land sales, I think it's the right thing for us to do. As Councillor Murray mentioned, this land is already being used by these people for the most part. So for us to sell it is eventually what needs to happen, and that way we get some cash. The city gets some cash for the sale, and also we start collecting property tax on what's already being used by people as private property. So I plan to support the bylaw reading. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. I'll call the speakers on second reading. I'll call the question on second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I move, seconded by Councillor Verdura, that Council hereby consents to bylaws number 2015-69, 70, 71, 72, and 73, going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
Your Worship, I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that bylaws number 2015-69, 2015-70, 2015-71, 2015-72, and 2015-73 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to delegations and related reports. Mr. Chad Novak, you come forward once again. State your name, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Thank you. Good evening, City Council, City Administration, members of the gallery. My name is Chad Novak, and I am here on behalf of the Saskatchewan Taxpayers Advocacy Group, which is a grassroots organization proudly standing up for individual taxpayers. I am here this evening to address the agenda item before you regarding the land sale of City of Regina property portions of Broadway Avenue, 19th, 20th, 22nd Avenue. I note that this land sale is subject to public notice due to the fact that it is anticipated to be done without public offering and without public offering and less than market value. According to the conclusion in the report, this is due to administration's understanding of a previous arrangement between the RM of Sherwood and Long Lake Investment, Inc. prior to the 2013 annexation process. I am not quite sure what your administration is using for this conclusion, but I have personally confirmed with the RM of Sherwood, it's in Figure 1, you'll see, that they have absolutely nothing on their records that would indicate any such agreement exists or existed. I should note that there is a further statement in the background of this report that suggests administration was, quote-unquote, made aware that Long Lake had an understanding with the RM of Sherwood to purchase the subject properties for the fixed price of $12,500 per acre. My question is, who exactly made your administration aware of this, quote-unquote, understanding? Was it Long Lake Investment? And if so, what efforts did your administration make to ensure that this understanding was in fact accurate? I would hope that due diligence would have occurred to ensure that there was, in fact, a legally binding contract in place. Within the report before you this evening, there is also mention that the city currently sells road right-of-ways, as was previously mentioned, at $6 per square foot for very small parcels of land that typically have services available. Using simple math, this would translate to over $250,000 per acre. Quite a substantial difference from the negotiated price that is being claimed in this report. There is also mention of how the sale of this land will complete an outstanding issue that was committed to in the consultations around the 2014 municipal boundary alteration. Now, this would tell me that this information has been known by city administration for quite a long while and was already promised to Long Lake Investment before it could legally be contracted to them. One of the many reasons this issue is a great concern to me this evening is because of the next part that is mentioned in the report before you. That is the mention that this will also enable development of the new Pacer Park site and the development of this area. It is my understanding that the city secured lands for the new Pacer Park location on September 11th, 2015, according to a press release issued by the City of Regina. Now, this appears to be a premature decision because of part of those lands that were secured are actually subject to sale in this very report. 2.39 acres to be exact. What I find even more interesting is perhaps your administration could provide further clarification was that the current registered owner of all of these lands as of September 2015 isn't, in fact, the City of Regina. It isn't Long Lake Investments. It is actually registered to Her Majesty in the right of Saskatchewan, which I am to understand means the province of Saskatchewan, see Figure 2 for the ISC report. So if I am to understand all of the proceeding, what is set to happen here this evening is that the City of Regina is going to sell to Long Lake Investment, Inc. a variety of lands totaling approximately 10 acres at a cost of $12,500 per acre. Then, Long Lake Investment is going to sell part of those lands right back to the City of Regina at a quote-unquote undisclosed price to be used for the relocation of the Pacer Ballpark, which was already announced in early September.
You have 1 minute left in your presentation.
It's okay for the citizens of Regina, though. I'll get past that part. This previous statement brings up a whole new issue, is who is responsible for the whole East Regina bypass being located along Tower Road. City of Regina commissioned a report. In closing, you have everything in front of you tonight. In closing, I would suggest that the sale not go ahead as recommended and that it goes up for public offering. Or, better yet, why not let the City of Regina just simply keep those lands and at least let those to be used for the new Pacer Ballpark so that the taxpayers of Regina and Saskatchewan aren't paying a private investor an undisclosed amount of money for doing nothing more than simply buying and selling the exact same lands virtually instantly. I will now open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Novak, for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. You got a bit rushed there. Just wondering if you have anything else to add.
Thank you. Yeah. What the issue that I have here this evening is actually part of a bigger part of this whole part of this process. The lands that are before you this evening are going to be as a result of the bypass being relocated. Now, it's okay for the citizens of Regina because we've been assured that the City of Regina is going to have the province of Saskatchewan compensate Long Lake Investments for these lands. According to Mayor Michael Fougere in the Leader Post, October 13th, 2015, the expectation is that the province will cover the cost. He goes on to say that, while we didn't cause the problem, the relocation of Pacer Park, because of the bypass, the problem was caused by the bypass going right through the ball diamonds. Now, this previous statement brings up a whole new issue, and that is, well, who exactly is responsible for the East Regina bypass being located along Tower Road? Now, before being declared out of order, I want to make it perfectly clear that the bypass location is directly correlated to the land sale before you this evening. Contrary to what has been publicly stated, the use of Tower Road for the bypass is not the province's fault. This is very important to note, because if it weren't for the most recent incarnation of the Tower Road bypass, the relocation of Pacer Ballpark wouldn't even be an issue. Up until April of 2014, the location for the bypass had been to the west of Tower Road, which has now been moved 400 meters to the east, causing the issue before you tonight. Further to this, the province of Saskatchewan hadn't even considered Tower Road for the East Regina bypass until around 2004, when the City of Regina commissioned a report to suggest that Tower Road was the better location. Before that, it was always presumed that the bypass would be located at Gravel Pit Road, because of the concern by the province that Tower Road was simply too close to the city, even back before all of that further development has happened and the congestion that's out there right now, and that internal city traffic would use it far more than what the bypass was intended for, that being bypassing the City of Regina for through traffic along the number 1 highway. Now, ironically, that was the exact reason why the City of Regina used to justify their reason for it being located at Tower Road, to accommodate city traffic. Now, as you will note in Figure 5, the general public and the surrounding RMs simply don't prefer that. They want Gravel Pit Road. So I want to make it perfectly clear on public record that while the city blames the province, the documents suggest otherwise. Thank you.
Councilor Fraser, do you have any other questions?
I think that's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Other questions of the delegation? You can return to the gallery and
Thank
we'll
you.
consider the report. This is CR 15-117.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward this report, and it is in regards to the land sale, City of Regina property portions of Broadway Avenue and 19th, 20th, and 22nd Avenue. Your Worship, the recommendations coming from the Finance Administration Committee October 6th are 3 parts. Number 1, that the sale of the undeveloped road right-of-ways, being a portion of Broadway Avenue, 19th Avenue, 20th Avenue, and 22nd Avenue, as shown within the attached appendix to Long Lake Investments Incorporated, be approved under the terms and the conditions shown within the body of the report. Part 2, Your Worship, that the administration be authorized to finalize the terms and conditions of legal sale documents which are outlined in the report, and Part 3, that the city clerk be authorized to execute that legal sale document as prepared by the city solicitor. If I can have a seconder, Your Worship.
Seconder for that. Councilor Ogden. Now, before we go to much debate, perhaps we have the administration provide background.
That was exactly what I was going to ask for. If we could have Ms. Harlock just give us kind of a Reader's Digest of where we are today, how we got here, and thank you very much, Your Worship.
To you, Your Worship. Back when we were looking at annexing these lands, the landowner had indicated to us that there was a verbal agreement to purchase the lands, the road rights of ways within this area. We did talk to the RM administration regarding that, and it was confirmed the landowner had previously, which we have copies of, purchased some of the right-of-ways in this area already from the RM at $10,000 per acre. At that point in time, during the annexation, there was a couple things that we could do, and that was wait and do the road closures while the lands were still in the RM, and then they would proceed with that. Or we could look at bringing the lands in, and as the report indicates, we had administration had indicated to the landowner that we would bring forward this verbal agreement that they had with the arm of Sherwood and recommend it to council. We feel that it is a fair compensation. There's a number of reasons. That being, this is a larger tract of land, and it isn't our typical process. As you could see, there was a number of applications previous tonight that are small parcels, and typically it's the $6 a square foot. In this case, this is a large tract of land at 10 acres, and the land values in this area vary quite a lot. This area of land is designated and will be developed for future residential area on the west side of the bypass. So we already know it is going to be residential development. The area and the land that would be sold to the landowner as proposed, the Pacers Park roadways that are in the area are not included. We are not buying those rights-of-ways from the landowner. They're excluded from our agreement for Pacers Park. So it's just the remaining lands outside of the area that we're taking for Pacers Park. As I indicated, the area is large and it will be redeveloped. So we had a couple options with this landowner, because what will end up happening is there will be a re-subdivision of this entire area with new road right-of-ways dedicated back to the Majesty and to the city in the future. So as a matter of note, in 2014 actually, the city actually closed all the rights-of-ways within the lands that we refer to as the Beaudry lands, which are south of the Regina Airport, which consists of approximately 51.92 acres. We closed those road rights-of-ways and didn't ask for any money for those, because we knew that the landowner would take that, do the replot, and dedicate all the roads back in a new configuration. So in this case, it is a unique situation that the landowner is willing to pay for these road rights-of-ways, because the option that council has would be to actually just consolidate them into the parcels, knowing that in the future the road rights-of-ways will be rededicated in the future. But in this case, the landowner is willing to honor the agreement that was struck verbally with the RM and indicated to the city during the annexation process, and is willing to purchase those road rights-of-ways.
Thank you, Mr. Orlock.
Thanks, Your Worship. Sorry, that got longer than I thought it would, so I sat down for a minute. That's okay. No, it's good. I appreciate filling in a lot of the blanks. Because, Your Worship, I actually took a drive out down Long Tower Road to take a look at this land to see where these road right-of-ways were, and frankly, I was half assuming that there'd be something there. But frankly, there's just field and stubble, mostly stubble at the moment. But this is actually something that was planned way into the future a long time ago for what could happen someday if, much like we do much of the rest of our growth around the city. And as you explained, Ms. Harlock, there is a precedent to us with these Beaudry lands that we do have these road right-of-ways all over the place. So obviously this is dramatically different than what we were talking about earlier with land that had parking pads, that was access to shops or garages or sheds or businesses. This is farmer's field. And so although the current owner didn't actually own that land, they've been working that up and using that land, correct? It's been used as a field. That's it.
Mr. Orlock?
Through Your Worship, that is correct.
So down the road, someplace in the future, there may be a need for a road, but right now, we don't need a road right there. Fair enough. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Other speakers to the report? Councilor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. When did annexation take place?
Ms. Orlock?
Through Your Worship, it took effect on January 1st, 2014, so it was during 2013.
Okay. And we've confirmed from the RN that the landowner had a verbal agreement with the RN before that time?
Through Your Worship, at the time when the landowner brought it forward, I did confirm it with the RM administrator at the time, which is now, they are no longer with the city, or with the RM.
Okay, so this is actually a pretty complicated issue, I think. Definitely the idea of selling this without public offering, I think that's fair. It's a unique piece of land, and I think if anyone else were trying to buy these random strips of land in an empty field right now, I think it's fair to sell it exclusively to the person who owns the parcel around. That's reasonable. The problem I have is about the value we're selling it at. You mentioned from our earlier parcel sales that $6 a square foot represents roughly a third of the value of service land. Is that correct?
Ms. Orlock?
Through Your Worship, not service what a parcel would go through. I might ask Mr. Barr to explain how the evaluation is achieved.
Mr. Barr?
Through Your Worship, the $6 a square foot is reflective of developable residential land, which sells for about $800,000 an acre, or $18 a square foot. So recognizing that most of these small parcels could not be a parcel by themselves, they would need to be consolidated. They have less value, so we've assigned a third of the market value to those smaller parcels that couldn't be a parcel standing on its own. And these road right-of-ways are similar in that they are narrow strips of land, and they wouldn't be eligible to be parcels on their own without having proper access to, without being landlocked.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that clear explanation. I have no problem with that. I think obviously if we're selling an odd piece of land, market value might not apply because, what else could people do with it other than add it on to their existing lot? The challenge is that we're selling this land for about 29 cents a square foot. We're selling it for less than 5% of 33%. We're more or less giving it away. Now, you gave an example of a previous parcel that was sold where right-of-ways were given for free under the understanding that different right-of-ways would be given back to the city. Is that fair to say?
Through your worship, that is correct. That happened last year.
So is that the expectation with this parcel of land, that right-of-ways are going to be given back?
Yeah, so through the development process, all of these lands are earmarked for residential development, as I indicated, everything west of the new bypass. And so when those lands are done through the neighborhood plan and the concept plan, roads will need to be developed in order to service a residential neighborhood. So a number of roads, even more than what we're closing now, will be required to service that area.
Sure. Of course that's the case, but I mean, with any new neighborhood, there's roads in every new neighborhood. Is there something unique? Is there roads above and beyond what any new neighborhood would have for roads, like when this becomes a neighborhood?
Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, just some more clarification on your question.
Sure. I mean, any new neighborhood has to dedicate roads. That's just the reality of having a neighborhood, is it has roads. Given that this parcel is getting such a deal on these little strips of land, are they expected to have more roads than any other new neighborhood might have?
Ms. Horlock?
Through you, your worship, no, that's not the case. As we indicated, in order for them to plan the area, it does make sense to consolidate it into the larger parcel to create a replot, for lack of a better word, on where the roadway should be and where it's the best connectivity. So that's what happened with the Beaudry example. That's why they were given back to the Beaudry lands as a whole, so that they could be replotted. So no, to answer your question, we wouldn't expect any more. What it will do is help facilitate the process of the redevelopment and the design of the area.
Okay, well, I understand that annexation is a big process and a tricky process. The challenge I have with us giving this land away for such a cheap price, when, again, as soon as we sell it, it's going to overnight be worth a lot more money than that. It's really based on this verbal agreement between two past owners. A lot has changed since annexation. There is a highway going through the middle of this land, and in my mind, if the shoe were on the other foot, if we were having to buy a piece of land from the private sector, I don't think the private sector, no matter who it was selling us the land, would say, well, we had a deal 2 years ago when circumstances were completely different. So I'll tell you what, we'll give it to you for 5% of what it's worth. So I would like to put forward a motion that we actually reevaluate the value of this land and come back, administration to come back with some fair price that would reflect the real value of this land, not based on a verbal agreement from before we were involved in it.
What's your motion?
The motion, I guess, would be a referral motion. That council come back with an estimated value, market value for this land, and a suggested sale price that I imagine, because this is an odd strip of land, the sale price would be something less than the market value. If we sell it in the city, as we did with 5 of the parcels early tonight, we sell it at a third of the market value. So I would look to administration for some recommendation about what the market value is for this land and what we might sell it to, presumably some reduced rate from that market value. Thank you.
So we're going to just see if we can get this motion down here. Now, there may be other speakers on this before your referral motion, which means we terminate debate on referral motion.
I'll look for direction then. Can I make a motion that's not a referral motion then? So people.
Well, I'll speak to the clerk about that, whether we can do that. This is, you're referring the motion by your words, which means that there's no debating your motion once it's the floor. We can ask for questions or clarification, but we can't debate the motion.
Okay.
Just Councilor Bryce, you have a question of clarification on the motion?
Yes, I do. I'm wondering if administration already knows the fair market value of this instead of referring it back. Do we already know this?
Through you, your worship, at this point, we haven't had an assessment done. We've had a number of appraisals within the area, and we know generally, because it's a parcel of land that isn't typically, it's not developable, there's no services within the area. Administration believes that the 12,500 is a fair representation of the use of the land, because it's because of the size of it, which is not typically what we would sell at the $6 a square foot, and the fact that at this point in time it's not serviceable. I think moving forward, as I indicated, the landowner has the point not to purchase it and just wait to do the replot. And at that time, what will end up happening is we would do the road closure at that time, and they would just rededicate the lands, and then we wouldn't actually have any sales of any rights of ways. So then we would just be out.
We'll suspend your motion, refer motion for a moment, and allow for some questions and discussion first. Councillor Bryce. Turn your microphone on.
Do I have to clarify, or are we suspended?
We're going to hold that motion in advance.
Okay.
Are you speaking just generally, or
just generally then?
Okay. You got 5 minutes when you're speaking. Okay.
Thank you. So why aren't we selling this at the current market rate? Just to clarify that. Not that I need to clarify. No, she did. Well,
she just answered the question. This is the second time you've asked it. Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, as we indicated, at this point in time, it is a large tract of land. The land values in this area vary. It is an option of council. We can go out, but it's a parcel of land. Once it's closed, it's really not developable. As per the Act, we need to sell it to any roads that would be closed like that. It needs to go to the adjacent landowner, so the adjacent landowner is the one that would get the parcel, and it's not serviceable at this point in time.
Thank you. So do we have an agreement with this landowner when these roadways are rededicated to buy it back at the same price then?
Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, we don't buy rights of ways back. They get dedicated through the subdivision process. So as I indicated previously, the other option is that we do not close these roads and sell them. We only do the Pacers Park, which we're not buying from the landowner. And at the time is when it gets redeveloped, then they would do a replot, and we would close those roads with no buying of any of the rights of ways, and then at that point in time, their new roads would be dedicated, so we wouldn't be getting any money for the closure of the roads.
So that was my next question. What would be the impact of that? We would have no money coming to us at all? Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. Question, how much land are they actually getting for the $12,500?
Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, it's approximately 10 acres.
10 acres?
And it's $12,500 per acre.
And you mentioned in answering her question that once the land is boxed in, what do you mean by that?
Ms. Horlock?
You said the land, once it's boxed, closed off?
Through your worship. If it's closed and it could become landlocked if it doesn't get consolidated with the adjacent parcels, and a piece of land cannot be landlocked, meaning it needs to have direct access to a developed roadway.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. Maybe I've missed something here, but why does he want to buy this when he doesn't have to? This could be handled like the Beaudry land was handled. What is the advantage to him to buy these 10 acres?
Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, the Beaudry lands actually although it was last year, it just came to light with the landowner, and at that point the question was asked of him, and it was indicated because it was a verbal agreement that had taken place during the annexation, and he was willing to, the landowner was willing to honor the agreement, to which he said that he would pay for the road rights of ways.
But doing that and buying the land doesn't give him any other advantages
Ms. Horlock?
that any other owner would have if you didn't do that?
Yeah. Through your worship, with the roads closed, it would help be able to subdivide the land easier and do the work that's needed in order to do the concept planning that's required for the area and create different parcels.
So it makes all the subdivision planning easier? It
would make it easier for the developer, for the landowner to do that. And of course, with the roads consolidated, it does provide the flexibility to create more parcels of a better configuration should they not wish to develop all of the lands themselves. If they wish to sell portions, then they could do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other speakers on the report? So we'll go back to Councillor Fraser. We suspended your motion. You have 1 minute left in your time to put that motion forward. It's not debatable. It's a referral motion, if you want to proceed with it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think the motion before us on the screen here, that the report be referred to administration, provide a report on the estimated market value of the land and what the fair price would be. I think that's actually what I'm after. And this land isn't going anywhere in the short time. Again, the number $12,500 per acre is something that, as I understand from reading the report, was born out of...
You'll need a seconder for this.
Yeah, was born out of the verbal agreement that the RM had in place before annexation, before the bypass project. So I would like this motion to stand. The number might well be the same. I guess we'll find that out.
Okay, let's see if you got a seconder for the motion. Seconder, please. Okay. There's no debating on the referral motion. All those in favor of the referral motion? Those against? Motion is defeated. Any other speakers on the report before I call the question on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll now move on to our next delegation, Mr. Munir Hague. If you could state your name, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there will be questions of council afterwards.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, city administration. My name is Munir Hawk, and I'm the residential land manager for Harvard Developments and West Terra Development Corporation, and requested to present our position with regard to street naming in the new community of West Terra. I'd like to start by stating that we greatly appreciate the work and the time the civic naming community has already put into the deliberation of the proposed street names for West Terra. Our multiple applications have been detailed in the Naming Committee's report to Council. It is not our intention to undermine any of their work. However, we do disagree with some of the names that were denied. And this sentiment was shared by Councillor Young and Bryce, who made the recommendation for us to revisit the names. This is why we are here before you today. In general terms, we have the same intentions that the Civic Naming Committee and City Administration have with regard to the objectives of placemaking and community building. These are concepts that are echoed in the OCP and the forthcoming cultural plan. The success of developers rests on our ability to create community in a sense of place where there was previously none. We do not take street naming lightly. We strongly believe that street naming and theming are important driving factors in the successful marketing and selling of our new communities to potential residents and business owners. We accept the Naming Committee will not permit the celestial theme based on the reasons presented in their report, and will not push this line of naming further now. Similarly, we accept that the committee's justification for denying Jack Sharp and Red Surge for street names. We do, however, feel strongly about that using a West theme name convention will be important in placemaking and creating an identity for the new community of West Terra. The name West Terra was derived from the geographic location of the community on the west side of Regina, and Terra meaning land, so literally meaning west land. There are many Regina precedents for naming streets after the neighborhoods that they are in. To name just a few: Harbor Landing Drive, Maple Ridge Drive, Lake Ridge Road, Uplands Drive, University Park Drive, and Eastview Avenue. We believe this helps new neighborhoods create an identity and a sense of place. We acknowledge the legitimate health and safety concerns first responders have in finding streets during an emergency. We will not be requesting that every street have the west prefix on it, like Wascana in Wascana View, or Green as in Greens on Gardner, but that 3 of our major streets be allowed the following names: West Terra, Westland, and West Park. Our justification for these particular names was included in our report package in a letter dated September 4th, 2015. West Park is a street name that we would like to use in one of our future phases on a street that runs adjacent to or touches our internal parkway system in 4 places. In this way, the street name lends itself to placemaking and sense of place, even within the community of West Terra. Included in our package was a diagram showing where we intend to use these names. There are currently about 7 or 8 existing streets that start with the west prefix spread throughout Regina. To alleviate concerns over mix-ups by first responders, we have only chosen street names that sound distinctly phonetically different than those that already exist. We believe that our request is acting in the spirit of the OCP and its direction to create meaningful places and communities, or placemaking and sense of place, to use terms from the OCP. We'd like to thank the Civic Naming Committee for previously approving the names Horizons and West Market Street. We see these names as major wins towards creating identity and sense of place for our new community. Once again, we are specifically requesting West Terra, Westland, and West Park to be approved street names, and that they are reserved for use now or in the future for the community of West Terra. Thank you, and I am available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hawk, for your presentation. Other questions of the delegation? Councillor Dahl.
Thanks very much. Good evening. I pretend to know nothing about why people name streets and how that works, so I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit. Let's assume, for sake of argument, so that I will understand, that none of this is approved tonight. What kind of street names would you then use? Would you go to the traditional, I'll say, street names that are after people, or some derivative of such? Do you have a plan B here?
Well, actually, all the names that we are, through you, Mr. Mayor, all the names that we're proposing tonight actually are not in our first stage of development. So this is some planning for one of the streets is directly south of our first stage.
Okay.
What we had always planned for West Terra was that, even with the name, is that it is intimately linked with the geography and location of it. So we were always looking at names that would relate to landform, flora, and fauna. Okay, and so and the names that we have put forward are have all been in that line of theme. The first theme that we put forward was sky as being being on the west side of town. For decades, it could potentially be, have beautiful views of the western landscapes and the sunset. That was the first theme that we had put through. That was rejected based on the celestial theme that wasn't approved by previous councils. So our plan was always to have the names intimately linked to geography and location, so landform, flora, fauna. But we think that the idea of being on the west side of town is intimately related to how that community will develop.
Thank you. This is not your first development, so you've picked names and so on before.
Yes.
I need to understand about confusion, and I want you to know there's a gentleman in a fire uniform that I'll be speaking to later to ask him about confusion. But,
okay.
From your experience, if you had distinctive names, so Brown, Smith, Jones on consecutive streets as compared to Green Apple Way, Green Peach Way, and Green something else way, which is less confusing, or which is a theme? I get confused on the green, just so you understand. That's what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. I'll leave that to you to explain to me.
And as I mentioned, I think that's maybe a comment for first responders. That being said, our first responders already respond to streets in Wascana View and Greens on Gardner, so they are versed in having to deal with that, getting clarification. The idea of, as I said, like we're only looking at 3 names here. We're not looking at putting west prefixes on the entire development.
Okay.
A lot of my experience, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, is coming out of Calgary.
Yes.
And in Calgary, every community carries the name of the community on the street. So if you're in Kincora, every street says Kincora on it. And in terms of kind of placemaking, understanding where that location is, first responders can get to the location quite easily because they know by the name exactly where it is. Once they get into the community, that's when they have to I guess rely heavier on their direction or their GPS or whatever. So once again, it's a question that's better answered by first responders. I know that we originally, because I don't know if you're aware of the concept for West Terra, but we have a main street.
Yep.
in West Terra. We really would have liked to have called it Main Street or West Main Street, but one of the justifications for why we couldn't use it, other than it's not necessarily like a main street in the grander sense of Regina, was that there was a main street in Moose Jaw. And the first responders respond to,
Gotcha.
Geographically as well. So.
Yeah. I appreciate your comment about Calgary. I'm familiar. I'll use that in my questioning. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Dowell. Other questions of the delegation? Councillor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Hawk, you are willing to give up some of the other names that are listed in the report this evening, and I'm speaking of Red Surge and some of the other astrological names. Is that something you are doing now, and you would like to bring them forward again later after the review of this policy, or is this something that you've just given up?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, if the policy changes, we will revisit the celestial theme. But for us, in terms of creating that identity and place, it's very important or we feel it's very important that we can get West Terra Boulevard as a street name. And the diagram that was circulated, we're showing that as a major east-west boulevard or street that will go through, from Pinky through the community up through the business park. So to speak, if we want to, we're looking to the name to hang our hat on. That would be it, and that's key to creating that identity. If you look at communities like Harbour Landing. Harbour Landing Drive is a major thoroughfare that goes through that community, and everything else ties into it. So for us, that's what's very important. Once again, if the policy changes, we will revisit. We still have a number of stages and a number of phases to go through in this development, and so there is opportunities to look at other things.
Okay. And what did you have in mind with Red Surge? Would you talk a little bit about that?
For you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Red Surge, my understanding is I'm not sure though. I guess it's a surge that the RCMP wear.
It's a uniform.
And it's part of the uniform. So it's the uniform. So it was paying homage to our neighbors to the east. So the RCMP.
Okay. Were any of the suggested names that you brought forward taken to any of the community associations surrounding, or was there any consultation done with the community?
For you, Mr. Mayor?
Your names?
No, there wasn't. It was Harvard has been doing communities for years, and often they are well known within the community, and often that's how the names are generated. We will. Especially when we're looking at parks and stuff like that, we'll be looking at naming them after individuals, particularly individuals who have contributed back to the community, and those are part of the requirements within the current policy.
So just so I'm clear, you want to use the name Westera, West Park, and Westland. Those
Correct.
are the three names that you'd like us to consider?
Those are the three names we'd like you to
West
consider.
Park would be circling that park area. Would that be the name of that street?
Well, it's on the diagram that's circulated. We have a bit of an internal parkway system, and while the concept plan in front of you is still conceptual for future phases, the thought is that street would touch it would be at the terminus of our main street. There's a plaza, and then south of there's another park. So it bisect that, as well as touch parks on the east side of the development, as well as the west side. So I thought it was a very apropos name for description of the road and placemaking within the community.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hawk.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other questions of the delegation? Councillor Flegel.
Thanks, and welcome. Are you being asked to provide names for your whole subdivision, or are you getting names for your whole subdivision, or are you kind of doing it as the streets become getting closer and then they put a name to it? What procedure are you under?
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding is when you go through subdivision, the streets all have to be they all have to be named as part of the subdivision going through. So where this started was we have stage 1, phase 1 in for circulation right now for subdivision. The zoning of it was previously approved by this council. So that's where the naming started, and we started developing the ideas about which areas of the community we want named after this, that, or the other thing. But all through that, it was always known that there's some key streets within this development, regardless of what phase they're in, that we would like to have particular names on. And as I said earlier, some of those wins, and I call them wins because I think they're very important in creating that identity for West Era, was Horizons and West Market Street. The other streets aren't actually in this initial. One of them is in phase 1. It's not an initial stage that's being subdivided right now.
So one of the 3 you're asking for wouldn't really be today kind of thing?
No.
Okay.
I guess what we're asking is that all of them be approved and for future use within West Terra.
Your other cohorts aren't here tonight. I'm surprised that West Forester Way wasn't asked for and Jedlick Way wasn't asked for too. And
well, I put a West Hawk name in there.
Did you?
That got mixed on the first round.
Good.
So
I appreciate. I'm surprised that Blair and Chad haven't put their name forward. So thanks.
Councillor Hawkins on that note.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Huck. I'm just interested. Can you explain what's wrong with the celestial theme? Why were those names withdrawn? What's objectionable about all of that?
I would have to, through you, Mr. Mayor, I have to defer that to the Civic Naming Committee. My understanding is that it has been that theme has been looked at before and possibly rejected by previous councils, but I think that's actually in the committee report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Any other speakers? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we have our next report. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of Council. This report originated in my office as per direction from Council a few weeks ago that we give reconsideration to the names that were submitted by Harvard that had been rejected by the Civic Naming Committee. Just a couple of things before I call on officials to speak to this. One of the primary drivers behind this was something that Council had directed us before to do, was to look very seriously at approving any names while there were 400 or so outstanding names on the existing list. That list of names for potential naming rights or roads gets longer and longer, and so you can appreciate that it gets more difficult to utilize them. So one of the things that the committee was doing was ensuring that we give consideration to those lists those names on that list that have been outstanding for some time. The second thing for you to keep in mind is, although there are guidelines to this, it remains Council's sole prerogative to make an exception to this. So it is within your power to act accordingly. So with that, we have 2 officials here with us who can speak to specific questions that you might have. We have Dana Turgeon, who's our Historical Information and Preservation Supervisor in my office, and we also have Deputy Fire Chief Jackson here.
Thank you for that. So if I could have a motion to put this report on the floor. Councillor Young, a seconder. Okay. Councillor Bryce, speakers to the report. Councillor Hawkins.
Your Worship, I'd just like to put the question I just put to Mr. Hawk to the Civic Naming Committee. What is objectionable about the names, the celestial theme? I know that I've read that it's rejected by a previous council on a previous occasion, but I don't understand why it's inherently objectionable.
Ms. Turgeon or Mr. Jackson, either one, I could answer that. Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It was put forward in 2007 to City Council at that point. It was my understanding at the time that they believed that it was not specific enough to Regina and was more of a general thing, that the sky is sort of visible everywhere. And they were aiming for more of what's along the lines now in the community plan, sort of hearkening back to heritage and history and groups and communities within the city.
I'd just like to follow that up and ask, I understand that might have been the opinion of a previous council, but in the terms of this civic naming committee, is there anything objectionable about celestial names? For example, it seems to me living sky is a pretty specific idea. Is there anything objectionable about that?
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Again, there wasn't really anything objectionable about it. It was put forward to the committee with a recommendation to approve, and the committee members felt that because there was such an existing long list of names that were already subject for approval or had already been approved, that we would like to see some of those names come off, especially in light of that some of the names, especially those from the Aboriginal community or minority groups, have been a little slower to come off the list. So this was part of that.
So, Your Worship, does this mean that the list of names is effectively closed, that there's no point in putting forward further suggestions until the 400 names or some portion of them have been cleared?
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, it does not mean that. We actually have a meeting coming up this week where we're going to be hearing quite a few names. This is merely, if we expand the categories even farther, it makes it that much harder to use a number of the names that are already on there. A lot of the names that are currently on the list are names of local community volunteers, of local fundraisers, of people that have worked for charity groups, that have worked in sports. Most of the names that are on there right now are of individuals. Developers, as Mr. Hawk said, the landforms and flora and fauna have been very popular as themes for developers in the last 5 years. And it's getting a little bit harder to pull some of those names of individual people off the list.
So, I repeat, that means that effectively the list is closed until you've worked through some of the suggestions you have.
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, we're still accepting applications. And people are welcome to put them forward. They have been coming off the list, but it is a slow process. Theme naming is, as I said, very popular with the developers, and they tend to prefer the landforms and flora and fauna. So we're trying to get some of those individuals and the volunteers and the people that make up the community, their names on the streets.
Thank you, Ms. Turgeon. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Price?
I just have a couple of questions about things like Main Street. Why was that rejected? I'll just start with that.
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It has to do with 911 dispatch for the province of Saskatchewan. It's actually quite complex, and we were unaware of this before the fire department brought it forward to us. 911 dispatch has 3 areas in the province of Saskatchewan, the south and one in the north, and then there's one, I believe, by North Battleford. If you ring a phone in the south and it's busy, 911 in one of the other 2 districts picks up. The problem with this is that those dispatchers aren't as familiar with the south area as they would be. In this case, because Moose Jaw has Main Street, and Main Street is a major thoroughfare in Moose Jaw, the potential for a street in Regina named Main Street to be confused with a street named Main Street in Moose Jaw in the case of a dispatcher in North Battleford answering the phone was too high, and the fire department objected. We did speak to Harvard and to Mr. Hawk, and they very generously withdrew that because of our concerns.
Okay, I just want to respond a little bit to that. So, and I'm not sure, through you, Mr. Mayor, who would like to respond to that. So are you saying that somebody would confuse Main Street Regina to Main Street Moose Jaw, Main Street Wilcox, Main Street, I don't know if Weyburn has a Main Street, like somebody wouldn't catch the city name? Would that not be a fear in all communities then?
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is a very big concern. We've had other applications come forward to the Civic Naming Committee where they have asked for names duplicating towns or other street names in other communities. When we became aware of the dispatch 911 problem, we tend to err on the side of caution. The Civic Naming Committee was originally founded in the 60s because a house burned down and someone passed away because of it. So we want to make sure that we are really erring on the side of caution.
Mr. Jackson, do you have anything you want to add to this at all?
Through you, Mr. Worship. Just to reiterate that it is a concern, and we do have 3 PSAPs answering points within the province, one in Regina, one in Saskatoon, and one in Prince Albert. So there is a risk, an increased risk with names of that sort.
Thank you. Councilor Bryce?
Thank you. So what happens with all of the other names in the city that have matching names in other cities throughout the province? That puts us at risk if you're living on one of those streets? Is that what you're saying?
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is very much a concern. We can only do so much because we can only deal with the names that are coming in front of us. We do not have power to change existing street names. That power lies with council. So we do our best to kind of keep the problem from getting any worse. We are aware, especially with sound-alike names, that this is a huge issue in the city. I myself live on Rothwell Crescent. There's a Rothwell Street, there's a Bothwell Street, and there's a Boswell Street. These are very confusing for 911 dispatch when people are panicking when they're on the telephone. So we want to keep it from getting any worse. I can't really go back and rewrite the past, but we can try our best in the future.
Okay, so I can understand the past, like Lakeview, Lakewood, Wascana Street, Wascana View, Lawrence Street versus Lawrence Street North, those sorts of things. But in looking at one of the reports tonight, we had Padwick Road, Padwick Crescent, Padwick Avenue. We had all those, and that's not that old. So when did we start correcting the things from the past?
Councilor Bryce, you're almost getting into a debate on this one. I know
don't mean to get debated.
I'm
a little frustrated.
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I actually do have an answer for that. This is, those are part of the Harbour Landing Plan. When Harbour Landing put forward their development plan, they asked council for an exemption. This is basically why we're sitting here today. That council passed an exemption allowing airplanes, aviators, aviation terms to be used in Harbour Landing. They also approved wholesale all of their names, including a number of duplicate names, including, as you mentioned, Padwick. Another major one is Groom, Roland G. Groom Avenue. And as Mr. Hawk said, Harbour Landing Way also went through at that time. All of these names have caused a lot of problems. I'll perhaps let my cohort here speak to some of those problems.
So through you, Mr. Worship, multiple streets with the same names, they pose a difficulty when handling 911 calls. So I did, before I came today, spoke to one of our more senior dispatch workers, frontline workers in dispatch, and she did confirm, especially in particular with the Sharp Street, with the Jack Sharp proposal. Streets like that with the same name, located in different communities or different locations, can pose problems. And sometimes it's extra questions that need to be answered or asked, which mean extra seconds. In an emergency, it can seconds count. So it just comes down to that fact.
Thank you. I want to express my appreciation to the naming committee. Those names are on there because council asked for those names to be on there, the ones that are actually on that list of 400. So we do appreciate you doing your job and going through based on the regulations that you give. So please understand that we do appreciate you guys doing your job as a committee for sure. So having said that, I wanted to ask about the Red Surge name. Is it because it wasn't on the list that it didn't get approved?
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. There is no provision for RCMP recognizing terms relating to the RCMP. We do have provisions to recognize officers that have served with the RCMP, that have lost their lives, that have served as commissioner of the Depot Division here in Regina, or who have done a lot of community work within the city. We have a number of names honoring that. There's kind of a limit as to how many terms relating to the RCMP, though, that are a viable, feasible theme. when Harvard initially came to us speaking about this, we did offer to put forward a guideline change forward to council, which is the ultimate body that decides whether or not we add to the names. Regarding the terms, but we did suggest that it's maybe a little bit limited, because once you've done red surge and horses, I'm not sure how many names you would find relating to the RCMP. In addition to that, the RCMP Depot does their own naming on their own streets within the Depot Division, which is a large property of land in the city of Regina. Most of the time, they do ask us at the Civic Naming Committee if they are duplicating a name and will cause us 911 dispatch problems, as does the Global Transportation Hub and the Wascana Center Authority, because they are at the RCMP Depot. They like to use the names of former commissioners and officers that have died in the line of duty. I did say this to Mr. Hawk. I said, if you go that route, it may be a good idea to speak to the RCMP just to make sure you're not taking away names they might like to use in that area. And they did agree, and that's kind of why it was red surge and nothing else.
Thank you very much. I believe my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to thank the naming committee for this work. It's difficult work because people are asking for things and you can't always give people what they're asking for. It's hard to say no. One of the things I understand is that this policy is under review right now. Am I correct in that?
Ms. Turgeson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. Jeff Urbach from Community Services is looking at it in terms of the involvement with the official cultural plan for the city.
Okay. And so while it's opened up for review process, one of the things about policies is that they need to change over time when the conditions and the situations change. And you have a very real problem when you have 400 names on a list and people are not choosing those names. So while the policy is being reviewed, I would just suggest that that we look at the threshold for how names are put on the list so that we don't keep amassing names that we can't use for streets, and that we think of other ways that we can honor some of those names. There's 400 people on the list that people put there because of work they'd done in the community, and rather than having them sit there, is there another way that we can honor those people? So I just put that forward as a comment. I'm prepared to offer a motion on the 3 names that Harvard has asked for, but I also am wondering whether council would be willing to look at the Land of Living Sky names, and that would be recommendation 4 and recommendation 3. I would certainly concur with not wanting to make it difficult to have names that would be hard to recognize on a 9/11. So Main Street would be out, as would be for the time being Red Surge and Jack Sharp.
So what names are you recommending?
So I'm wondering how to put that forward, because what I'd like to do for council to consider would be to have the names in recommendation number 1, West Era, West Park, and Westland be approved, and West Side, Main, and Red Surge be denied. And then Jack Sharp be denied, which is recommendation number 2. Recommendation number 3 would be approved, and recommendation number 4 would be approved. So I'm wondering if council is ready to make that kind of a move. I'd like to hear from you.
We can test that with, see if we have a seconder for that.
Okay.
Councillor Bryce seconds that. On the amendment, and once we have it written up, we'll be able to see exactly what is on, what's being recommended here.
I don't know whether you want to take them one at a time, even.
Well, we can do press all
yeah.
at once, unless someone has objections to it, then we'll do them all at once. So we'll be speaking to the amendment once it's on the floor. It's been seconded by Councilor Bryce, so once we have it up on the screen, Councilor Burnett, you want to speak to it? Yes, right. To the amendment.
I'm certainly comfortable with approving the three names that Harvard would like approved tonight. I just asked, I guess, the question around public safety, that when we talk about all names under sort of a land of living sky, I'm worried that, are we comfortable that we don't run into the problem of other communities using a lot of the same terms and names that'll get us back into that safety issue. But again, certainly recommendation one I would approve. But
Councilor Bryce? Or Councilor Young? Sorry.
I think that the names in number 4 are those Land of Living Sky names. I think those are the names. Am I correct?
Ms. Turgeon, how do you see that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you were to approve the recommendation in number 3, or to approve that the guideline change be approved, that would open that up for use by anyone else who wants to come to the committee and suggest celestial names. So it would be the same as any of the other guidelines, and would be open to anyone. In the case of Harbour Landing, when council passed that one, they passed it specific to Harbour Landing so that only Harbour Landing subdivision could use those names. So if you wanted to limit it, that would be the best
So
way.
then we would change the wording to limit it to Westera.
That would be the approach that would keep keep it in one area and keep other
Okay.
developers from using it.
All right. And then are those names in number 4 the same names that would be then that would come under Living Sky, Land of Living Sky, Eventide and Moonlight and Nightfall?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, those would be included. However, in the future, Harvard would be eligible to put forward more names
Okay.
under that guideline for a future development.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, on the amendment, Councilor Burnett, you have the floor still. Are you okay?
I think that helps clarify. I was just nervous about the public safety issue with the 911 calls. That it seemed like we were broadening it very wide, given the fact that we started with sort of 3 names and we got into the whole astronomical theme. So.
Good. Next speaker is Councilor Flagel.
Thanks.
To the amendment.
To the amendment, yes. Regarding number 3, it is, on the Land of Living Skies, so if we open the door on that, then basically there goes the list of 400 names. Because Westera and anybody else is going to want the new funky names. And in my opinion, Land of Living Sky is more of a provincial slogan with the license plates than it is anything to do with the city. The names, the celestial, the land, but when we say that word, in keeping with the Saskatchewan land, the Land of Living Skies, and then we throw other names that we sort of delegate around that, to me, I'm not crazy about this one, for sure. The 3 names, I'm all for it because, and I'll speak to that after we're done with this motion, but, well, I guess no. I guess I better speak to that now because it's part of this motion. I'll speak to it on the amendment. The 3 names, I think, should be included because they basically are the beginning of the development. They're the landmarks of the development. They're all part of Westera and everything going forward for that. And I have some questions about another couple of developments, but I'll ask those after, and I want to know how they came to them. But it's on another development. But I am good with the first 3, but I need clarification on what we're talking about. When we say Land of Living Skies, and then we go to Celestial, like, where did this all come from?
Ms. Turgeon?
Yeah. Victory Church.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not actually sure. Probably that would be a question for Mr. Hawk, not for us.
I think the city clerk could answer that question or provide information on that.
Sure.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councilor Flagel, I think it's fair to say that when the reference is made to in keeping with Saskatchewan as the Land of Living Skies. I think it's just a reference that, as you've already mentioned tonight, that's referenced on the provincial license plates and in a lot of provincial advertisements and promotional materials. But I don't think anybody can say that's what Land of Living Skies means. I think in this case, it's the astronomical phenomena is the key reference point. But that would,
Yeah.
So
Well, no.
perhaps it might even be, I mean, if the Land of Living Skies reference was stricken, maybe that would clarify it.
Okay.
Okay. Councilor Flex, thank you. Councilor Murray, on the amendment.
Thanks, Your Worship. I don't know. I'm not sure where to go with this one, because at first I was thinking, yeah, this would be great. We can get some new names and some creative stuff. We get the creative juices flowing. All of a sudden I'm thinking, holy moly, there's an awful lot of names that could come forward, a lot, as we open this up. So I guess I'm just looking to Ms. Turgeon on, I guess, is this a potential precedent that we're setting, that we could have other developers coming forward saying, we only want these 2 or 3 names. Next thing you know, we've opened up the floodgates. And what does that mean?
The astrological one is only for West Air. It's not open to anybody else.
Well, I get that, but now all of a sudden West Air's got astrological, and now the next group that comes along says, hey, we want to have that too, and we want, I don't know, pick a thing, whatever that might be.
Ms. Turgeon?
We want to name our streets after cities in the United States.
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think this is entirely possible. I currently am having conversations with a developer who wants 2 names as well, and they are also not approved on the list. They also have problems with duplication to other names in the city, and that developer is watching this very closely to see what happens tonight, and I can pretty much anticipate that we'll be repeating this in another month if this is approved tonight, because they are very interested in seeing what's happening here. This did come about because of Harbor Landing, which was an exemption of council. So I think that puts it forward in the minds.
And further to that, then, the 400 names that are currently sitting on that list that are kind of in hiatus because they haven't obviously been chosen, nobody's really found a connection that they wanted them, are there some of those names that could be taken off that list that no longer really are applicable? Or, and again, no disrespect to people's names or their history, because I won't get a Murray Street because there's already a Murray Avenue and it's not mine. So I get it. I won't get a golf. Well, I already have a golf course named after me.
You do?
So I guess maybe I'm all right. But for my young learned friend, Councillor Fraser, what's he going to get? An institute name? Stuff like that? Wait a minute.
Ms. Turgeon?
Culprit. What can we do with those names that are left hanging?
Ms. Turgeon, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the cultural plan review is looking at a number of options. One of the options, which is done by other municipalities, is to force a certain percentage of the names off the list to be used by a developer. So say 1% or 2% within the development that they would have to pull from the existing names and then select that way. In the case of a name such as yourself, when there's 2 people with the same last name or a similar sounding last name, in order to honor both recipients who are worthy of being honored, the person who had the name named after them first gets the first listing in the street naming document that we have, and we add additional names to the list as additional honorees. In addition to that, we always send a letter from the mayor congratulating people on having their name selected. And the other thing we have been doing is using social media to kind of promote these people and the efforts they've done in the community. So that would be something we continue to do.
Thank you. And Your Worship, before anybody and my colleagues say it, I know I'm not worthy of getting my name recognized, so that's okay. I know somebody's going to say it. So.
Thank you, Councilor. We have 2 other speakers so far on the amendment. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. I have some questions. I want to begin, if I could, directing them to Mr. Jackson, please. Specific to the terms West Terra, West Park, and Westland, could you tell me if you see or understand from your 911 call operators if there's any issue with those streets, specifically those ones?
Mr. Jackson?
Your Worship, those specific names I haven't ran by our dispatch to, but if they're in the same location, it does make it easier. versus spread apart within the city.
Thank you. You would have heard, as I heard, that from the delegation, that in Calgary, you can go to a certain area of the city, and I will pick one, Douglas Bank Court, Douglas Bank Street, Douglas Bank, and it goes down the list, and they say that is reasonable. I find green, whatever it is, confusing as heck to me. So could you comment from your point of view as to how you and your team would feel about those?
Mr. Jackson?
Your Worship, again, multiple streets with the same names or similar names does pose a problem, both from the public service answering point where the call is initially taken, those are provincial run, and then when they're forwarded to our dispatch, there's room for error again. So they're handled twice, and multiple streets with same names or similar names do pose a problem, and they can, especially with excited callers.
And would it be fair to say that when there is an emergency, people have emotion and get excited?
Mr. Jackson?
Your Worship, that's very fair.
Okay, thanks. So if I could ask Ms. Turgeon a couple of questions. First one is, of the 400 names that are on the list, were they not all applications by someone, family member, friend, etc., so that they could be on the list?
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a number of them are put forward by family and friends, people that feel that they should be honored. A number of them are put forward by development companies. Okay. So it's very common for a company like Harvard to come in and request 30 names at a go when they have a subdivision plan ready to go. When the development companies do this, they're typically looking for a theme, so plants, animals, and so forth.
But it would seem that in the past, when we had some of our existing older neighborhoods, that was not the case, that in fact there was different street names based on people or monarchy and so on. Would that be accurate?
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It sort of depends on the developer. Even back in the 60s, you did have developments. University Park Drive is one of them, where a number of the streets are named for universities around the world. Okay. You did have some of that theme naming, but you also had a bit more developers using names of people in the community, local folks, and the like. That said, there is still a lot of that still going on today with some developers that are using names of just regular individuals.
Okay, good. Thanks very much. Just a couple of thoughts. One is that I heard a radio newscast earlier today, and the lead item for City Council was the naming of streets. And I have to be honest with you, I smiled. I really thought, really? That's what our big item is tonight. And yet, this is a debate that we have. And so I was part of council that referred this back to a naming committee, and based on Ms. Turgeon's very professional responses, I think we did the right thing by putting it there. That's one. Two, I am respectful of the fact that a lot of people over a long time have put names forward because of people who contributed to our community, a significant number of those names. And all those names pass through a number of councils, and they sit there still. And I think that's an issue for me. When I first looked at this and saw the names Westera, West Park, West, honestly, I'm fine. I don't get it. But I am aware from sitting on SUMA on your behalf that we've heard about issues with call centers, and in particular when a call is forwarded to the north, i.e. PA, and they have to deal with items in other communities, and it's been a problem. So there is a notion of confusion here that I do not like, and I want to be respectful of the people who are making those decisions. It would seem to me that the names Westera, West Park, and Westland at this point I can accept. I will not accept the others. And so when it comes to each one of these notions, I would ask for a separate vote on each one, please.
Thank you, Councilor Dowell. Councilor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to start by saying that I appreciate Councilor Burnett's point about safety. I don't think there's any real debate about that. But I also want to say that I appreciate Councilor Young's motion in its entirety. And particularly, she makes the point that there's more than one way to honor people, that we don't just have to look to road names. There are a myriad of other names, other ways to honor people. But I also want to say this, listening to this debate. It seems to me like we're in a time warp of old fuddy-duddy names, boring names like John Smith or Mary Jones or Bob Hawkins, names that attract no interest, no imagination, no color, no creativity. Why do we have to do that? Why do we limit ourselves? Why do we close off our list, and it is closed, why do we close off our list to those kind of old, worn-out, tired, usual names? On the other hand, what do I see? I see somebody coming in and saying, how about celestial names? And Chicken Lick in the Sky is going to fall in. Well, it's not going to fall in. If we use some themes, we'll get some interest, some color, some imagination. What could be better than names like Dusk, Moonlight, Nightfall, Starburst, Living Skies? So I'd ask, and this is the reason I support Councillor Young, I'd ask that we get on with a little bit of imagination and creativity in the naming of our streets. Give it a little bit of color. I mean, no disrespect to the honor of prominent citizens from the past, but there's no reason to monopolize street naming on their behalf. Let's spread our wings a bit. Let's do something, as Councillor Flegel said, but didn't accept. Let's do something that's a little new, a little funky, and a little more imaginative. This naming policy needs a boost. It needs new criteria, and Councillor Young's motion is the very way to do it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Findura. On the amendment.
Amendment. Wow, Bob. How do I follow you on that one? To Your Worship, I do understand what's going on here, but at the same time, I have to echo Councillor O'Donnell, is that there are a lot of names out there. And I know that a lot of people spoke to me about that. And asking, I've been on this list for probably 25 years, 30 years, so why am I even there? So I can understand, and I accepted three, Westera, West Park, and Westland. I mean, it's that kind of gives the what's out there. But then we have a lot of names. Yeah, maybe, they might be boring, they might be old, whatever. But these individuals have dedicated their time and put their name up with their families. And so there's probably maybe once a month or every second month, I say, well, you know what, my name's been on there for a couple months or a couple years, and nothing's moving. So I can see if there's movement. I can support some of the things if we can redo some of how the naming committee works and how the names are coming forward and how do we get them to move. Because if they sit, I can see the 400 or whatever, they're going to sit there, we're going to start new. So what do we tell? What do we tell someone who's been working in a community for 40 years? So I'm supporting the three names, but everything else I'm going to support the denial. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you very much. Other speakers on the amendment? Councillor Bush, you've spoken on the amendment already. Then you can't speak again on the main motion when it comes up, you know that. Go ahead. And you're limited to 3 minutes.
Okay. So my understanding, I understand what people are saying, that we're trying to honor people by having their names on that list, but isn't it true that when these names came forward a month ago to us, wasn't it, I'm trying to remember some of them, Alfalfa Way, Lentil Lane, Red Wheat Streets, or wasn't it crops that were on here? It wasn't people that were on there, am I correct?
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. The names that went forward were, again, they were flora and fauna. The category that they qualified under, which is guideline 4, is flora, fauna, and landforms. So these are things that are common to Saskatchewan. Harvard had decided they would honor crops that are grown here, connecting back to the agricultural community in Saskatchewan.
Thank you. So I understand the passion that some of my colleagues have about honoring those in our community. They wouldn't be honored by these streets. This is something new and innovative, and I think it's something that we as a community, I think, should be very proud of, looking at new things. These streets will not be named for honor of some residents and volunteers and people who worked hard in our community. So if you're holding back, waiting for that to happen, it's not going to be happening. It'll be alfalfa, canola, it'll be all the crops that were once there. So I just want to make sure I've made that clear.
Thank you, Councilor Bryce. Councilor, can you take the...
Your Worship, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I just rise to speak to the motion before us, and I'm going to speak very strongly in favor of the first recommendation. And I hear nothing in the discussion from the administration or from council that this would be a confusion for our protective services. And I think that's a paramount issue is protection and safety of those in any neighborhood or community. And given that they are in the same area, as I understand it, that there's less likely to be confusion on that one. So I think that's a solid proposal. Certainly, the delegation made it very clear of the rationale behind that, and I think that works. That works for me, and I hope it does for the rest of council. On the other one, recommendation number 3, which I think is the other one that being suggested to go forward on, I'm having some trouble with that one, and the reason I am is because we already have a review being done by our naming committee as well. And I want them to come back and tell us whether this would work or other sort of expansions to be creative, as Councillor Hawkins talked about, could be brought forward as well. Because I do think we need to revisit our criteria on this committee. A lot of great work being done, no question about that, and a lot of people who are citizens, past and present, who have done great things for our city are on that list, and they should be there. But we look at expanding the definition and criteria for it. This to me is almost like a one-off. It's only meant to be for Westera. It doesn't apply to anywhere else. And for me, if we're going to change the criteria for one area, I think we're opening ourselves up for a lot more confusion. So I strongly support the first recommendation. I will support the second recommendation as well. The third one I struggle with, and I'm going to, I believe Councilor Dell asked this, so I'm not sure, have separate votes for these. I will not support recommendation number 3. Thank you. Councilor Young, do you want to close debate on the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Worship. I thank all my colleagues for weighing in on this and giving their opinions, and thank you to the naming committee for all the work that it does. I am supportive of the changes to the recommendations as they have been made, but now they're moving around. Okay. Number 3, the Land of Living Skies was brought before council and turned down. So the reason it's not in effect is because council turned it down. That means council can put it back on again too. So I'm going to speak in favor of that. But in keeping with the Land of Living Skies be approved for the Westera development, I don't know about only. Could I ask a question again about that?
You can, but your time is running out on your speaking.
My time is running out.
Yes.
I'll talk fast.
Go ahead.
Could I ask, please, what would be the advantages of having it for Westera only?
Ms. Turgeon?
If you had it for Westera only, sorry, Mr. Mayor. If you had that recommendation for Westera only, it would limit the amount of celestial names within the city to just that one subdivision. It would probably also lead to other development companies coming forward and asking for similar exemptions.
For their own development only.
Ms. Turgeon?
Okay. I see. Yeah.
3,
I see
Mr.
what you
Mayor,
mean.
yes.
So then, one of the ways we could handle this would be to take the only off and just approve Land of Living Skies type names for use, and not say it's just for Westera.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to how do I do that?
Well, I'll make it as a friendly amendment then. Or just-
Okay, friendly amendment to take it out of the area or the arena of just for Westera and have it just be an area of terms for city names that could be open to anyone who would like to put names forward.
Okay.
Okay? And then number 4 is not up there. Do you still have recommendation number 4? That has not
That's
been
included
removed.
within, I think, number 3 includes 4.
It's included in number
Included in
3. Okay, very good. So then I'm going to speak in favor of all of the recommendations as they appear now.
Thank you, Councilor. Now, there's been a request to have these voted on individually, so that we've all spoken. So I'm going to move us to recommendation number 1, that the names Westera, West Park, and Westland be approved, and that West Side, Main, Red Stairs be denied, as they do not qualify under guideline number 4. I'm going to call the question on that one. All those in favor? Number 1. Opposed? That's carried. Second recommendation is that the name Jack Sharp be denied for health and safety reasons because the city of Regina already has a Sharp Street. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Recommendation number 3, that the guideline change for terms derived from astronomical phenomena or its observation in keeping with Saskatchewan as living skies be approved. All those in favor? All those opposed? It's denied. It's defeated. Okay, so we need a motion to approve as amended. Motion to accept the report as amended. Seconder? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we'll now move on to the mayor's reports. You can take the...
I surely can. Your Worship, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'd like a seconder for an appointment of the interim city manager. If I could have a seconder for that,
Can I have a
please.
seconder, please? Councilor Burnett.
Thank you very much. This is a very important report before us tonight. Members will know that Mr. Davies has retired, and his last effective day of employment is October 31st of this year. Acting in his place for the last few weeks is Mr. Archer. The report before us tonight is to extend his effective appointment from November 1st, 2015 until such time as we have a new city manager appointed. And we are going through the process now of that determination as we speak, and should have that done, we're hoping, sometime in the first quarter of 2016. This is an important housekeeping issue. We have Mr. Archer in place today. This is simply to extend that until such time as we have the new city manager in place. So I hope members of council will support the motion before us. Thank you.
Thanks, Your Worship.
Any discussion on the recommendation?
Comment?
Councilor Fraser.
Yeah, thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is a really important process we're going through right now. There's a few of us sitting on the search committee, and I'd just like to welcome Mr. Archer to his new role and say that I think we're in very safe hands and competent hands in this interim period. So thanks for your work so far, and I look forward to working with you as city manager for the coming months. Thanks.
Well said. Councilor Fraser. Other speakers? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. Archer. Do you know what you're getting yourself into?
Some days, Your Worship. Some days I'm not so sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Bylaws and related reports. We have a Community and Protective Services report. Councilor Flagel.
Thanks. I rise in support of CR 15-118, and that City Council approve the continued participation in the Saskatchewan Discount Bus Pass program. That City Council delegate authority to the Executive Director of City Services and negotiate and approve a letter of understanding agreement regarding the discount bus pass as outlined in this report. Basically, it's just continuing on with what we've done, and Community Protective Services has formed their opinion, and they all agree with it, so.
Seconder, Councilor Hawkins, you second that? Okay. Speakers to this report. This is a long-standing program that we have, and certainly looking forward to put your contribution to this as well. Councilor Fraser?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions here. So the report mentions that we've last year sold about 26,000, purchased about 26,000 R cards through this process. Is that correct?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, that is correct.
Okay, and that represents monthly passes.
That is correct.
Do we know how many unique individuals have accessed this program?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, I'll defer that to Mr. Bells.
Mr. Bells?
Mr. Mayor, my best guess would be each one of those individuals would be an individual pass. There could be a family adult pass along with the youth on the same family program, though.
Okay, and just expanding on that a question a bit, do we have any idea of how many unique individuals purchase R cards over the course of a year, both within and beyond this program?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, I'll defer that to Mr. Bells.
Mr. Bells?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this time I do not know the amount of unique passes that there are.
Okay, could you speak to how many rides we're on track for this year?
Mr. Bells?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, 2014 we roughly had 6.5 million riders.
Okay, great. That's a lot of rides. And final question, are there any other provincial monies that we access for transit?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, I'll defer that to Mr. Bells.
Mr. Bells?
Mr. Mayor, we also have a program through the provincial government that they help supply us with our capital funding for purchases of new bus on an annual basis.
Okay, outside of capital, though, this is the only money we access for operating. Is that correct?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, I believe that is correct.
Okay, and this is a tough one. Do we know if there's other examples from across Canada where provincial governments give money to transit operation? Thanks.
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, I'll ask Mr. Bells to comment on that.
Mr. Bells?
Mr. Mayor, I apologize. No, I do not know of other examples. I do know that the Sask provincial government is funding this program at their time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councilor Fraser, other speakers to the report? Councilor Fraser, you don't want to close debate? I'll call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have a supplemental report, IR 15-17, on the civic and superannuation benefit plan.
Your Worship, I'll move the recommended disposition of that informational report because it does coincide with the next report coming up.
Seconder for that, please. Councilor Bryce. Any questions or comments on the information report that does feed directly into the next report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Murray, Executive Committee reports.
Thanks, Your Worship. I've got before us the Regina Civic Employee Superannuation and Benefit Plan, and the recommendations coming from the October 14th meeting. They are quite long and wordy within here. Do you want me to go through them all, or to highlight them?
Just highlight them, perhaps.
Okay, just because it is quite wordy, and again, this, no disrespect, is extremely important, and I know that we've got a number of members here, obviously from the pension department, as well as we've got a couple of our members from the fire department here as well, so welcome, gentlemen. So number one is that the following agreements substantially in the form herein, attached herein as Schedule D to this report be approved in principle and entering into on behalf of the city, subject to any amendments being made that are necessary in the opinion of the city solicitor. Part A, that the sponsorship agreement, including the list of participating employers, the plan text, the funding policy, the trust agreement, and the employer participation agreement. Part B, that the trust agreement, and Part C, that the participating employers agreement, so that the city clerk be authorized to enter within that agreement and the trust agreement once those amendments to the pension benefits are recommended or enacted. That is that bylaw 3125, the bylaw which pertains to City of Regina's superannuation benefit plan, be repealed. That will happen effective January 1st, 2016. And then the new pension and benefit regulations amendments from which would include the amendment. Somebody help me with that one. No, it's not an amendment. Oh, sorry, it is to amendment. It's time for me to get glasses. Can I borrow your glasses, Councilor Bryce? Yeah, I know, I just made it bigger. The amendment that provides no solvency repayments be required to be paid within respect to the plan, and Part 2, that the amendment that allows for the 20-year amortization period from January 1 to 2016 to unfunded liabilities established as of December 31st, 2014. There's a Part B to that the Civic Employees Benefit Committee execute the sponsorship agreement and the trust agreement to the participating employers, and they execute the employer's participation agreement. And the last part, that the city manager be delegated the authority to do the following. That would be to appoint those sponsor board and administrative board who are named by the other participating employers in the plan in accordance with the participating employers agreement, and B, appoint the city's representative to the sponsor board and administrative board. Your worship. After all that, I'm looking for a seconder.
Seconder for that, please. Councilor O'Donnell.
The very long and short, your worship, is that after a tremendous amount of work between our administration and a number of other groups, including all those employee groups as well as employer groups, many of which came together for us to reach this point where we are today, we now have a system that has been approved by the province that as we go forward, we'll be able to provide that benefit to assist in retirement for those members who are participating within this, your worship. So I'll leave my comments to that. It is a significant and very historic moment that we've now been able to reach this point. So, thanks, your worship.
Thank you, Councilor. Other speakers to the report? Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. I have a few questions before I make a comment. So in the supplementary report, I just want to be clear, is it now such that the provincial government, through its powers, have allowed us to have a 20-year agreement to handle the liabilities? Is that what that is?
Mr. Weary?
That's correct, your worship.
And further to that, does that mean that they are endorsing the plan as it goes ahead?
Yes, they are.
Is there anything else in that piece of legislation that is beyond what I've just asked?
There's the permanent solvency relief that was requested. There's the 20-year amortization, which you've just discussed, Councillor O'Donnell. There's also several provisions related to decision-making within the new governance model that will be formalized in the regulations as well. So that's the one thing that's perhaps a little bit different, but can be recommended and supported.
Thanks very much. In the report that we're considering right now, are all of the agreements, all of the changes to the plan the same as what we had discussed in earlier reiterations on the floor of council and that employees would have considered? Are these identical?
Mr. Weary?
There are a few minor technical changes, but nothing substantive has changed from the package of material that Executive Committee has previously reviewed.
Thank you very much. Have the employees group endorsed this plan as well, as presented?
Mr. Weary?
Yes, they have. Their formal endorsement is part of the package that's before council tonight.
Thanks very much. And have all of the other employers who were signatories to the agreement previously all agreed to the conditions as laid out?
Mr. Weary?
Your Worship, there's letters of approval from each of the employers that are going to be entering into the new arrangement in the package that's before council tonight, so the answer is yes.
So that's a little bit ongoing. So what happens next? So if council agrees, what happens next?
Mr. Weary?
You have before you a repeal bylaw that will take effect when all of the governance documents are executed by all the parties so that the new legal framework is ready to go. The new pension regulations take effect January 1st, 2016. And if approved tonight, we will begin the process of getting all the contractual documents executed by the respective parties.
Thank you very much. And is there any need or notion that our employees or all of the employees for all of the employers need any further information or information sessions? Is that part of this?
Mr.
Part of the plan, sorry, going forward.
There have been ongoing information sessions, and all of the employers and the employee groups are directing questions regarding the ongoing changes to the plan to the Pension Admin Board, who are in a position now to answer those questions and explain how the plan is going to change going forward.
Okay, thanks. So when I'm going to just pick a date, January 1st, 2016, do the previous committees that administered this pension plan, as it was called previously, cease and do the new boards start? When is that transition?
Mr. Wurry?
The transition will take effect as the documents are signed. The new appointees to the respective boards, there is a new sponsor board.
Yep.
The pension administrative board will continue largely the same. They'll have the same 12-member board. I believe many of those people that are currently sitting on the administrative board will continue with the new board. Those are the main things that that change. I should also note that the Pension and Benefits Committee does continue to exist for the purpose of appointing people to the new boards on within the new governance model. So council's role is very limited. You are in the process of delegating authority for appointing city representatives to the respective boards to the city manager.
Yeah. Noted. Thank you very much. And my last question to Mr. Wary is approximately how many employees across all of their jurisdictions are affected by this?
Mr. Wurry?
Between 4,000 and 5,000 employees are active members of the plan right now.
Thank you very much. I would just like to express my sincere thanks. This has been a long process, and I think a process that involved a lot of negotiation and care. And I want to refer to a note that Mr. Councillor Murray read that was part of the agreement. It's called a trust agreement. I've stood before you before and spoken of that, and that's what I really like about this more than anything. I wish to hopefully ensure that our employees that they have got a solid plan, that at all times during this part of negotiation, council stood to make sure that that would happen, and I'm glad that our employees are with us on this one. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers to the report? Councillor Murray, if you could take my seat, please.
Your Worship, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I too stand in greatest satisfaction, relief, and thank you to so many people who brought this event to conclusion tonight. This is a huge relief, I think, for everybody who has worked for the city, who has a pension, that was concerned about that, current workers for the city and the other employer groups, as well as the employee groups. All of them worked together and had tremendous leadership. So I want to name some people. I did this at Executive Committee. I'm going to do it again because these people have spent countless hours behind the scenes working extremely hard. And these are not easy negotiations by any means. So these names are people who have dedicated themselves to this plan, this city, and the welfare of so many citizens across our city. So I'll start with internal to the city of Regina here. Brent Schoberg, Byron Weary, Jana Marie Odling, Jim McClellan, Darlene Walker, Allison Ridgway, Glenn Davies, Curtis Smith, Ed Archer, Chris Holden, Don Barr, Brian Powell, and Myrna Stark Leader. We have the Mobius benefit administrators who will be administering this new plan. Colin Lowenberger, I believe, is here tonight in the audience. Carla Coote, Carrie Trefumuk. And from the Civic Pension and Benefits Plan, I believe Kirby Benning is here as well. Guy Marsden and Gloria Quinton Cuddington. We have, of course, the external employers beyond the city of Regina, which is the Regina Capel Health Region, the Regina Public Library, the Board of Education of the Regina School Division, Buffalo Pond Water Treatment Administration Board, EPCOR, and, of course, the Office of the Superintendent, Lee Fletcher and Tammy Dove. These are, again, I think we should express our thanks to these people who have done so much for us. This issue has been before this council and previous councils for many, many years. It has seemed for so long it was almost impossible to get this working properly, to have a sustainable fund that dealt with a proper governance structure, that we could make decisions and move forward, that we could deal with the unfunded liability, that we could provide a pension plan in the future that the other plan was not sustainable. But I repeat, the leadership of the people I mentioned here and others have brought this to a successful conclusion. We can breathe a sigh of relief and be thankful. So on behalf of this council and the residents of Regina and the employees of the City of Regina, I want to thank those people around this room who have done a fantastic job. They deserve our round of applause. This is the last step in the process. The effective step in the process is for us to repeal the current bylaw, introduce a new one, and I know Councilor Murray, we're very happy to begin that process right away, and I would, of course, expect and hope members of council will vote unanimously for this report. Thank you. Other speakers to the report? Councilor Murray, do you want to close debate? Okay, I'm going to call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We're now on to the bylaws. Councilor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. So the bylaws, I move, seconded by Councilor Hawkins, that bylaws number 2015-74 and 2015-77 be introduced and read the first time.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councilor Burnett, that bylaws number 2015-74 and 77 be read a second time.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councilor Bryce, that council hereby consents to bylaws number 2015-74 and 77 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councilor Young, that bylaws number 2015-74 and 2015-77 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Excellent. Move on to the committee reports. Board of Police Commission. Councilor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. Happy to rise to table the, is that what we're doing? We're tabling this? The recommendations coming from the Board of Police Commissioners from October 21st, and that would be our operating budget for the police, operating and capital. So number one, that the 2016 Regina Police Service operating and capital budget, which includes estimated gross operating expenditures of $80,837,800 and revenues of $9,156,100, resulting in a net operating budget of $71,681,700 be approved. Part two, that 2016 capital budget of $2,770,000 with capital funding be determined by the Regina City Council be approved. Those are the recommendations, Your Worship.
Councilor Vice seconds that, and of course, as the recommendation says on the screen, this will be considered at the December 7th meeting of City Council. This is a referral motion, not debatable. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Your Worship, I'd like to suggest a 10-minute recess.
Seconder for that?
Second it.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Back at, it's about 5 after. Oh, yeah, it's been. If I could bring council back to order, please. Yeah.
That's like herding cats.
Yeah, no kidding. I'd like to continue on with executive committee reports. Report 15-121, Pacer Park Project. Councilor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm happy to rise to bring forward this. It is the Pacer Park project, and this would be the procurement authority. So recommendations coming from the Executive Committee from October 14th, that the City Manager as delegate be authorized to prepare, negotiate, review, amend, and approve any requirements, required amendments to the province of Saskatchewan for compensation as a result of the site relocation works for Pacer Park. Part 2, that the City Manager or delegate be authorized to prepare, negotiate, review, amend, and approve the agreements necessary for the Pacers Baseball Incorporated to facilitate the site relocation works for Pacer Park. One of my colleagues granted me a nice pair of glasses here. Holy crap. How do you see out of these things? Sorry, I'm not ready for those just yet.
Is that part of the recommendation?
All right, that's not part of the recommendation. But what is that the City Manager designate a delegate be authorized to issue a request for proposals for, you might have to hold it for me, engineering services for project management, design, tender preparation, construction, supervision, and site relocation works for the Pacer Park project. Part 4, the City Manager and his or her delegate be authorized to award and finalize the terms in the agreement for the successful proponent chosen from the engineering services request for proposals. That the 5th part, the City Clerk be authorized to execute the following agreements after review and approved by the City Solicitor. Those parts being the required amendments to the with the province of Saskatchewan, contract award to successful proponent as a result of the engineering services requests, and any amendments or agreements necessary for the Pacer Baseball Incorporated to facilitate the site relocation works in Pacer Park. That's like a tongue twister, Your Worship.
It is.
But it's really important.
So before you go any further, I had to get a seconder for that.
It's a good call.
Councilor Bryce moves. Okay.
Councilor Bryce, thanks very much for seconding it. At the end of the day, Pacer Park, obviously, as many of us are aware, we're part of those that were caught up in the new bypass that's happening. So happy to see that we're going to be able to find them a new location and get them all set out. So that'd be the motion, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Other speakers to the report? Pretty straightforward. Councilor Flagel.
Thanks. Just a clarification, just so everyone kind of knows what's going on here. Now, the city is building this in conjunction with Pacer Park, right? Who's doing the work? Like, who's orchestrating this whole thing?
Mr. Onray has all the answers to that.
Pardon?
Mr. Onray has all the answers to that.
Well, here's my question, though. Is it the province, is it Pacer Park organization, or the city orchestrating this for Pacer Park?
Mr. Onray.
Through your worship, in general, it's all three. Specifically, the city will lead the project in conjunction with Pacers Park.
Okay. Now, my other question is, the dollars and cents of this is going to be how much upon completion in a few years?
Through your worship, we're still in negotiations with the province, so we don't have a number yet.
Okay.
In ballpark, $10 million.
$10 million. Okay. Now, is for those out there not sure, and some of us here, is it something that the city is going to have to front the money? Is the province putting the money forward, and we're spending that money through the land sales and the movement and the bypass, or how is this all going to transpire, and where's the money coming from? I guess is the biggest question.
Mr. Onray.
Through your worship, part of the negotiation is we have an agreement in principle. So the funds being paid to the city for the relocation of the park, that is the money that will be used to rebuild the park. There will be no further contributions from the city required.
Okay. Now, is Pacer allowed to use their existing park next year, like 2016? Any of it?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, there is a parcel north of the existing park that has 4 diamonds that Pacers will use for their slow pitch portion of their program.
Slow pitch. And then by 2017, some of the fields should be ready within the new park?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, we expect to have the park fully usable by the spring of 2017.
By the spring, okay. So really, they're only going to be out 1 year, and we have facilities around the city that we can accommodate them for 1 year. The next year, they'll move forward into their new park.
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, that is correct.
Okay, good. Thanks. That was what I needed to just to clarify. I think this is a great opportunity for Pacer. I mean, I get what they're saying. I'm a baseball guy myself, and there was some uncertainty and concern about where this was going to be and why did the bypass have to go there, and it was the city's fault. And well, no, it's not the city's fault. It's something that just happened, and growth was there. Growth is going to come closer to Tower Road, and the turns are going to be right on the first, second, and third diamonds. So to ramp off of Tower Road to go west on Arcola Avenue, they'd be driving right over a pitching mound. So it had to go. I think a 1-year hiatus from a park and splitting it up a little bit is going to be a little consolation, or great consolation, because what they're going to get is the facility. And Mr. Fink, I know, has done a tremendous amount of work. So have a bunch of others in the organization. And I know I've talked to Jim the one time there at the park, and, it's like, let's go. It's sort of like it's unfortunate it happened, but when he started Pacer Park, he had nothing. So now they're starting with a clean slate, but $10 million. So hopefully it all works out. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Flaker. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. Could I ask, this is a conversation that I remember from a long time ago at the time that Pacer Park was developing. And at that time, the people, and you mentioned Mr. Fink, because he and I had a conversation. It seems to me at that time they were told this was a temporary location. Can you verify that or not? Was it always expected to be a temporary location?
Mr.
By the way,
Onright?
nothing to do with the bypass.
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, just for clarification on the question, you're talking about the
Current site.
existing
Yeah, existing.
park?
Yeah. You're not sure?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I understand. When this park is developed and where it will sit, access will come from where? So specific, I'm looking, is this within a neighborhood now, or will it be within a neighborhood? And so it'll just be a regular park within a residential development? Is that the plan?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, there will be development just to the west, and there will be development to the south of Pacers Park in the future. The access will come off Tower Road into Pacers' new location.
Okay, good. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Other speakers to the report? Before we call the vote, I just want to note Mr. Onright and his staff has done an excellent job in securing the land, and the report for us tonight, as well as will happen in the future for relocation on Pacers Park. So thank you, Mr. Onright, to your staff and you. If there's no other questions on the report, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. As the night winds down, we're going to finish off with some pretty exciting ones. This is in regards to CR 15-122, and that would be the Sask Music proposal for the 2016 Breakout West Awards and Festival. Your Worship, there's a number of parts to it. First, that the City of Regina indicated support to the amount of $50,000 cash grant from the Community Investments Grants Reserve for the Executive Committee and for the 2016 Breakout West Awards Festival, subject to the following conditions. And those are 5. Your Worship, that the City of Regina's funding is conditional upon the 2016 Breakout West Awards Festival receiving the proposed level of $100,000 in provincial funding, B, the completion of a multi-party agreement outlining relationships, accountabilities, responsibilities, and roles of funders and organizers. C, that recognition of the City of Regina accepts no obligations for deficits, loans, or guarantees for the 2016 Breakout West Awards and Festival. D, Your Worship, that we demonstrate the ability for the 2016 Breakout West Host Committee to plan and host the event through a strategy which outlines the proposed organizational structure, human resources plan, operations and financial plan, evaluation plan, and risk management plan. And finally, Your Worship, a commitment by the 2016 Breakout West Host Committee to provide the follow-up report that identifies how the City of Regina's funding was utilized and through this hosting of this event. Your Worship, those would be the recommendations. If we have a seconder.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Fraser, that's good. Speaker to the report.
Thanks, Councillor Fraser. Just very quickly, Your Worship, these are those types of events that we like to help showcase our city and take advantage of having these great festivals come to us to help do that. So, Your Worship, proud to bring this forward and look for a consensus on the motion, Your Worship. Thanks.
For that, speakers to the report. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, Regina held this event in 2012, and I think it was a really great event, not only for people of Regina, but also it attracts a lot of people from away, and those people come, they have a good time, and when they leave some money from their pockets. Here, the estimation is that the economic impact of Regina's investment of $50,000 in 2012 was well over $1 million. So to me, this is a great way for us to spend our money, and I think ultimately, if this comes here next year, Regina will do a great job of hosting, and it'll be a lot of benefits for people across the city. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Other speakers? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Finance Administration, 2014 reserve balances. Councillor Murray.
I rise to bring forward CR 15-123, and that would be the 2014 reserve balances. Your Worship, there is going to be one adjustment, because I think you've all seen an additional document on here as well. Just last page had one of the numbers that was a little out of kilter, so we've had an addition there. But so with that addition or that amendment to the report, so there would be three parts to the recommendations coming from Finance Administration October 6th meeting. That $2.5 million be transferred from the General Fund Reserve to the Social Development Reserve. Part two, that $2.5 million be approved from the Social Development Reserve to fund the 2016 Capital Grant Incentive Program provided through the Housing Incentive Policy. Part three, that $195,000 be transferred from the Community Investment Grants Reserve for the Finance Administration Committee to the General Fund Reserve. Your Worship, those be the recommendations coming from the Finance Administration.
Councillor Murray, can you just talk a bit about the purpose of the report being to just report on the balances, minimum, maximums?
Yes, Your Worship. We can get some information from our administration, but again, it is about the minimums and maximums that we hold those reserves, and it's very important that we have reserves within the city that we're able to provide some of those things. One of them we just did as well, and that was the Breakout West function that's going to be happening. Those reserves need to be replenished and adjusted and modified from time to time to make sure that they stay within the guidelines we have. Those guidelines are within the report, Your Worship. I just had to slip through to find them. So we have a number of reserves. Planning sustainability, asset revitalization reserve, asphalt reserve, facilities reserve, fleet replacement reserve. Your Worship, there are numerous reserves that we have, and you were looking for specifics.
No, that's good.
Are you okay with that?
That's fine.
Yeah, and the report's very well written, and it does describe all those various reserves that are within it, and there's also the appendixes A and B. At the tail end of the reserve balances is where the addition, it's on Appendix 2. Nope, Appendix 1. Which one was that on that? Is that not on this one?
That the replacement.
Sorry, you know what? No, this belongs at. This belongs to a different one. My apologies.
Okay.
No, ma'am. It's getting
Seconder
late.
for the report. Councillor Hawkins, speakers to the report. Good annual update on what's happening. Go ahead, Councillor Fraser and Councillor O'Donnell after.
Okay. Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. So the question I have is about recommendation number 3, that $195,000 be transferred from the Community Investment Reserve, Grants Reserve, for Finance and Administration Committee to the General Fund Reserve. Can someone just explain how the Community Investment Grant Reserve works in general?
Mr. Onwright?
Through your worship, I'll ask Ms. Shaley to speak to that.
Ms. Shaley?
Your Worship, there are 3 different community investment grant reserves. One is attached to Community and Protective Services, which is where the bulk of our grant funding falls. The second is attached to Executive Committee, which has a grant program for special events. Those two reserves, typically the budget that's allocated to the committee is fully allocated to groups within a year, so there's very little that's added to the reserve in those two committees. The third is the Finance and Admin Reserve, and this is it's a budget line that was established a number of years ago to fund SUMA, SARM, Agribition, a partnership with the university's Industry Liaison Office and Royal Red. And so in the last few years, because Royal Red left Regina and the partnership with the University Industry Liaison Program was terminated, the funding has remained, but we no longer allocate the funding to those two organizations. That's why the $195,000 is left within this account. We currently don't have a formal application and adjudication process within this program area. The administration is making a recommendation through this year's budget process to move the $195 into the Community and Protective Services grant program, where we have very strong, fair and transparent processes in place to protect the allocation of funds.
Okay, thank you very much for that detailed explanation. So, just out of curiosity, how much, $195,000, what does that represent as a percentage of the whole amount of money that we allocate in a year through all three of those avenues for the community investment grant?
Shirley?
So the total allocation is roughly $4 million per year. That's excluding grants to Wascana Centre Authority, ROC, and Regina Exhibition Association Limited. So the percentage would be...
Sure, that's small.
Is that enough?
Sure.
Yes.
That's fine, thanks. So I'm just curious, how many, what's the value of the applications we would have for that money in any given year?
Shirley?
Through you, Your Worship, we fund roughly 50% of the asks that we receive within the Community and Protective Services Committee grant program. That's why we're recommending that this $195 be transferred into that program next year.
Okay, so I appreciate that. Again, there's a bit of, I feel this is a bit of a technical glitch that this small piece of the community investment grant, because it's allocated to something outside of the regular funding stream, this year it'll get put back into to general reserve. It seems a shame when that $4 million we do allocate to the community has such a huge impact, I think. And as you mentioned, something less than half of the applications that come in get funded. I appreciate that moving forward, we'll move this money. Hopefully, the recommendation will be, it seems from administration, that moving forward, this $195,000 will be allocated through the regular channel. Supposing we wanted to do that this year with this $195,000 that we're talking about tonight, would it be possible for that to happen?
Shirley?
Your Worship, what we would recommend to allocate the funding in the most fair and transparent manner would be to add the $195 to next year's program as a one-time increase. The applications for the 2015 program were accepted last January. The adjudication took place in March. And so to go back and try to reallocate to applications that we accepted almost a year ago would put us in a very difficult position. It would put the community in a difficult position as well. And so we believe that the best approach would be to add that level of funding to next year's program for one-time projects.
Okay, thanks for that. So I'd like to propose an amendment to these recommendations. That number 1 stay the same, number 2 stay the same, but that number 3, the $195,000 that's set to be transferred from the Community Investment Reserve, Grants Reserve for Finance and Administration Committee be transferred to the General Fund Reserve. I'd like to change that amount of money be transferred to next year's Community Investment Grants allocation process.
Seconder for that? Councilor Flagel, on the amendment? Thanks. Speakers to the amendment? Councilor O'Donnell?
Thanks very much. I just want to refer back to what Ms. Shealy suggested. Was the suggestion as a one-time 195? Because obviously in terms of budget, then it's up to council to decide how much the whole pool would be. But you were suggesting one-time boost. Is that correct? Or
Shirley?
as a possibility. Sorry, you're not telling us what to do. I get that. But your suggestion was as a one-time, correct?
Ms. Shirley?
Your Worship, to clarify, through this year's budget process, we're recommending that the 195 that's allocated annually be moved to the Community and Protective Services Committee. But in terms of the 2015 195, to address Councillor Fraser's question, if Council wanted us to allocate that 195 to groups, we would recommend that it also be added to the 2016 budget as a one-time. When I say one-time increase, we would dedicate it not to annual activities, but to one-time projects, so that the community doesn't become reliant on that level of funding.
And so if I could just ask the mover, you understand that, and that's your intent as well? Okay. I just wanted to be clear. Thanks.
Other speakers to the amendment? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. To the report as amended. Yes, who seconded that? Councillor Flayton seconded it. You seconded, yes. Okay, so other speakers to the main motion as amended. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. I just want to ask administration a little bit about reserves generally, and I want you to know where I'm coming from specifically. This gives me great comfort. So, in terms of the numbers of minimums and maximums, is this comparable to other cities of our size? Or, well, I'll start with that. Is this comparable to cities of our size?
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of Council, reserves exist for three purposes, and really each community decides what its comfort level is. So from the perspective of general comparisons, you want reserves to smooth the effect of tax changes year over year. You want to be able to fund in-year unplanned spending requests, as happens from time to time, and you want to mitigate the use of debt financing. So the levels of reserves that exist in Regina reflect those objectives based on Council's expectations and its level of comfort with the amount of financial risk that communities take. As we go through our long-range financial planning and as we develop better understanding of asset condition and replacement requirements, I think we'll find our reserve levels are relatively low, as most communities across the country are finding as well. So while today we would find comparisons that would make Regina look relatively favorable on an absolute basis, from a needs-based perspective, our reserve levels are probably insufficient for maintaining the service expectations that we have in a growing community.
I appreciate that information. I'll pick up on the first point. First point seemed to be that this is a calming effect when it comes to budget. In other words, because there's always this amount of money that's there, then there is less fluctuation in terms of what may be needed for tax increases, all things being equal. Did I get that correct?
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of Council, that is correct.
Thank you. Has the administration discussed where we are deficient? I don't mean in terms of amount of money, but in an area where we could use a reserve that we currently do not.
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of Council, those types of questions answers occur throughout the year. I would ask Ms. Schultz for some assistance in providing a response. We're in the early stages of building a long-range financial plan for the organization, and she may have been involved in some other conversations that dive a little deeper into that question.
Ms. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Worship, as Mr. Archer has indicated, we are beginning to look at a long-range financial plan, and within that we will be looking at the reserves that are available in order to see into the future to determine what our needs are as far as the services that are provided and where the funding can be found in the future to determine whether we need to increase the reserves, whether we need to look at debt or taxation, whatever forms of revenues are out there, and that will all be determined through our review within the long-range financial plan.
Okay, thanks. So as I said from the beginning, this gives me great comfort, so I really like the path that we're on. I will save my long-term financial commitments and desires for more multi-year budgeting for another time, but I see a tie to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers on the report? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that you just answered this, but I'm curious as to when do you trigger changing the target level for reserve fund? What would trigger that?
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of council, council decision would trigger the change. Advice we would give you about that would come with a model that looks at the corporation's long-term financial future. So looking at our service commitments over the long term and the choices that we might make around debt financing in future periods, the amount of asset renewal work we may want to do, and the levels of service that we're trying to manage would all be factors that would inform our advice to you. But the decision to change target balances or to accept different service levels or different levels of debt financing to sustain services are council's choice.
Thank you. Other speakers on the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Mayor's Housing Commission and Information Report 15-18. Perhaps, Council. Oh, sorry, tax enforcement. Sorry, Council Murray.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward CR 15-124. This is a tax enforcement application for title for 2015 liens. Recommendations coming from Finance Administration that the manager of property taxation be authorized to serve 6 months' notice on all parcels of lands included within the list of the lands marked within Appendix A. Your Worship.
Seconder for that, Councillor Hawkins. Speakers to the report. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. I have two questions. The first one is the number of houses, addresses on this list any different than on what you would call the usual year for the last 5 or 10?
Ms. Horlock?
Your Worship, I'll ask Mr. Barr to answer that question.
Mr. Barr?
Through Your Worship, the number is slightly higher than it has been in the last year and the year before, so there is a trend of increasing numbers of properties on this list. However, through the process, when it comes down to this is step 4 of 9 steps towards a tax title. When it comes to actually taking a tax title, we took 2 tax titles last year, 1 year before, and if you go back to 2010, 2011, we're averaging about 6 or 7 in those years. So the trend is that we are seeing more on this list, but the collections remains very positive results.
And just a brief follow-up to that, and I'm not looking for specifics, but is there repeat addresses that occur on a fairly annual basis or not?
Mr. Barr?
Through Your Worship, for the initial letter, I would say yes. For the ones that get further down the tax process, I would say no. As people get involved in the tax title process, we try to get them on a payment plan to get them out of it, and also strongly encourage them to be enrolled in a TIPS program so they don't end up in the same situation again.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. Question, because it's just something I wanted to know. Do we treat the people that are landlords on a piece of property any different than we would treat a homeowner, a resident that lives in the land as we go for taxes? Because in a landlord world, it's considered more of a business. So is there a difference how we treat them?
Mr. Barr?
Through Your Worship, no, the legislation doesn't differentiate between owner-occupied and rented properties. And so as long as the properties are in a residential class, they'd be taxed the same, and it would be the multifamily properties that would have a different tax rate.
So if we have a landlord that owns 10 properties and he's arrears on 6 of them, is it immediate payment? Or, I mean, I guess because if ABC commercial business was in arrears, would we not cut them a deal but try to make payments? And do we do the same thing on both sides, like to the business side of property taxes, that we would to a landlord who is in business doing houses? Would we do anything differently?
Mr. Barr?
Through Your Worship, the process is the same. It's a legislative process.
Okay.
And we also have commercial properties as well that would be in the process as well, and we would treat them all the same, give them the same opportunity to get their property out of the arrears.
Okay, good, thanks, just need to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. How much money are we owed right now through this process, if we know?
Mr. Barr.
Through your worship, I don't have that information with me right now, but I can tell you that when the report was made about a month ago, there was 411 on that list, and there's about 30% of those have paid in the last month, as we've just by this process itself. So each step of the process, more people would come forward and resolve their tax issues.
Thank you. And we do see this list annually. So in the last year, how many properties did we actually take possession of because of unpaid taxes?
Mr. Barr.
Through your worship, the properties for last year's tax notices, we've taken 5 so far this year, and that's an increase from the previous year where there was 3 taken.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other speakers to the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we'll move to the Mayor's Housing Commission. Members of the Commission, Councillor Hawkins or Young or Burnett, if you could move those reports. Housing reports? If you could move them, okay. Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. IR 15-18. I move that the report be received and filed.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Young?
Your Worship, I'll speak to this briefly. This is really a procedural matter. That Mayor's Housing Commission asked for that Council tonight receive a supplementary report dealing with the order in which applications for the housing incentive policy be considered when the applications are made. Effectively, up until now, the applications have been considered on a first-come, first-served basis. The administration is recommending that that policy be modified so that the applications are done on a fixed date basis, and in that way, it's hoped that applications for nonprofit housing will not be reached after funds have been allocated. The administration, Your Worship, may wish to correct me or may add to that, but my understanding is that's the thrust of this motion. I just say one other thing. The Housing Commission asked that private developers be canvassed for their views on this change, and the report notes that they have been canvassed and that no responses were received.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. To the administration, any further comment on the information report? Ms. Morlock, you're okay with the explanation? Nothing further? Okay. Speakers to the information report, which really feeds into the next report, of course. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now the main report from the Housing Incentive Policy. Moving for that one. Councillor Young, do you want to speak to that, please?
Your Worship, this is from the Mayor's Housing Commission, and it's the revisions to the City of Regina Housing Incentives Policy, and that's in Appendix A. And I'll just refer to the objectives of the policy, and this follows on Councillor Hawkins' bringing forward the change in how housing will be accepted for funding. So it's to support below-market, affordable, and accessible housing options and stimulate below-market and affordable rental housing development. And to encourage housing development that makes efficient use of established city infrastructure, so building vibrant, sustainable, and inclusive neighborhoods, and to aim resources where there are gaps in the private market's ability to address housing needs, which is the low-income households, and to encourage diverse housing options, including housing for distinct and special needs groups. So the changes to this policy definitely move it toward affordable, lower-cost housing for people who actually need that, which means that it will give the advantage to people who are building that type of housing. That doesn't mean that other private developers besides nonprofits can access money for this, but they will be not considered for this money until October 31st, if I'm correct, and please correct me if I'm not, so that the nonprofits have an opportunity to be funded right away when they apply, whereas the people who are the private developers will be able to apply as well, but they won't be selected until after October 31st.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Hawkins. Major redirection of our housing policy, which is very welcome. Speaker to the report. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I rise in support of this this motion. You know, I think the housing situation in Regina has really changed during our time on council. We've gone from having the lowest vacancy rate of any city in Canada for about 5 years to now having a healthy vacancy rate, likely around 5% when the numbers come out, I think, in the next month or so. The numbers I'm talking about are CMHC numbers, and they're not all telling. You know, they deal with multi-unit rental spaces of over 4 units put together. The market sort of caught up to the need of that. We're actually going to be looking at approving about 425 of those units in the next 2 reports here. So there's segments of the rental market that have greatly changed in the last 3 or 4 years, and there's some segments that haven't at all. You know, as far as affordable housing goes, if you talk to Regina's nonprofit housing providers, there's long lists. Some have lists of literally hundreds of people. For people who are on fixed income that need, have a bigger family, need a multiple, like a 3 or 4 bedroom place. Those are nearly impossible to find in Regina right now. So it's all to say, I think this incentive has helped push the market in the right way, and I think this change is what's now needed for the new market we're faced with right now. So I look forward to supporting the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other speakers. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. I too will be supporting this. I want a little clarity. I'm a little plugged here, sorry if I'm not coming across very well. Area 1, Area 2, Area 3, and I see the definition here, Area 3 being established, new, and developing neighborhoods. Is that, now I'm confused as to specifics. So if in Area 1 it says downtown, warehouse, center square, I get that. Area 2, core established neighborhoods, I'm assuming that's North Central, Heritage, but I'm not sure if that means anything else. And specifically in my area, I'm referring to Rosemont. And then there's established, new, and developing. So could I remember seeing a map at one time. I didn't see a map in here. So could you help me with who are these areas?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, actually, it's Appendix A. There is a map. It's within the policy document. So if you go there, it outlines the map areas and exactly which neighborhoods are at each area.
Got it. Thank you. I don't know how I missed that. Sorry. Are there people who want to build 3 and 4 bedroom units that are attainable, affordable, or whatever the correct term is now? Are there people actually that are coming forward saying, I'd like to do that?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, yes, there is. I could defer to Mr. Richard to give more details around the number of inquiries that we have around that.
Thank you to your worship. One thing we noticed is the vacancy rate for larger units is quite lower than the average of all the units at 4.8%. So in consultation with our stakeholder, it was certainly indicated that there's a strong need for larger units, and that's certainly why we're suggesting to increase the incentive for that. We don't have specific numbers. Beside that, we know the vacancy rate is quite lower for the large units.
So you're comfortable that there are people that will come forward. Thank you. The other thing I've heard over time is that there's also a deficiency in, I'm not sure what the right phrase is, bachelor suites or single people. Is that accurate? Is there a deficiency for single men or just single women, especially the lower income?
To your worship, I'll defer that to Mr. Richard regarding that specific use.
Mr. Richard?
Thank you to your worship. The incentive will certainly, like I indicated, be higher for larger unit. For the smaller units, the incentive we're proposing to stay the same. We have not necessarily observed a shortage. One thing we're proposing to change with the scorecard is that the scorecard will be higher, where we try to answer to some of the housing need related to people difficult to house, to youth, or to seniors. So those group of people, if a developer propose housing for those group of people, the scorecard system will give them a higher score.
Okay, good. I like this. So last question. So I'm assuming that we've vetted this a little bit with the province, and do they see some excitement in this, as I think council is?
Ms. Horlock, are they excited?
Pardon me?
Are they excited?
I think they are, but yes, they are familiar with the program and are supportive that the program meets complementary policies between themselves and ourselves.
Well done. I'm very pleased. Thanks.
Other speakers to the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have two Regina Planning Commission reports. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. So this is an application for discretionary use, a planned group of apartment buildings, 5300 Parliament Avenue, Harbour Landing subdivision. If I could have a second, I'll speak to this.
Seconder, please. Councilor Burnett.
Thanks very much. So this is 150 rental units. Actually, on this site, one of the buildings previously approved is under construction. So if you go down Parliament on the north side, you'll see that there. And so it exists already, and this is a continuation of that same rental development. And by the way, this is not the only piece of property that this developer owns, and I'm not sure what the other side of it is. So anyway, that's what's going on there. You'll note the number, and there's 225 stalls. I'm going to just make a comment about, and I've said this before on the floor here, but Planning Commission has asked administration to respond back to us after having surveyed, and you heard in the previous report how many large-scale developments there have been for rental in the last while. I think in total now there's 1,900 been developed and another 400 under development. That does not include what we're bringing forward today. I believe that's correct. And so we want to see what the parking ratio is. In other words, how many spots, in this case of the 225, are being used on a daily basis so we can get a handle on that. Other than that, we're happy with this location and so on, and expected to come forward with seek concurrence.
Speakers to the report. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Councilor O'Donnell.
This is our last one. It's an application for discretion to use. Planned group of apartment buildings. This is parcel B, Greens on Gardner, Primrose Green Drive, and Chuka Boulevard. If I could have a second, I'll speak to this.
Seconder, please. Councilor Young.
Thanks very much. 276 units, 420 stalls. This actually is quite adjacent to the new school site. If you recall, way back when the whole Greens was first coming for us, there was zero rental development proposed for the area, and market demand has changed that. There is one existing development already there, and this is the second one, and they are excited to get going on this and service the area. Concurrence, please.
Speakers to the report. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have two information items, one on the new statutory holiday service review and the annual report on city debt. Can I have a mover for those reports, please?
Your Worship, I'll move those reports with, as earlier mentioned, I had talked about one of the reports had an inaccurate graph, and that was the report that I was actually referring to, and that would be the second one, the annual status report on the city debt, IR 1520. So with that addition from the clerk's office, I'll move the two.
Okay, that's good. So a seconder for those two reports. They're moved at once. Seconder for Councillor Flagel. Speakers to either report 19 or 20. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. Sitting with Community Protective Services, could the administration just explain to anybody that's listening or the rest of the people here that what this is, what's going on?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, this is the 5 additional holidays that were added to transit service in 2015. Council approved that as a pilot project. The current statistics will show the cost recovery for the holiday days is running at about 21% versus 33% cost recovery on Sunday service. However, the ridership is about the same. The reason the cost recovery is less is because this runs on a holiday day, there's overtime that is paid, and that is the differential.
Okay.
So the total amount is about $115,000, and that is in the 2016 budget.
So you're saying 5 of the days, so there's more holidays than that, though?
There are 9 in total.
9
So
in
there were
total?
4 in previous to 2015, and the 5 additional.
And the 5
into the
additional,
total.
but the total cost is $115 for all of them? For
No,
9,
this
or
is-
just the 5?
Just the 5.
Just the 5. Okay, just needed to clarify that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, so you've asked for 2016 to have the budget for this to go forward for another year, am I correct?
Mr. Enright?
Through your worship, that is correct.
Okay, perfect. I read that, and I just wanted to make it clear to everybody that although it was a pilot project, we're still going on with it next year. Thank you.
Councillor O'Donnell?
I just want to clarify that. It is in the budget. If this is not approved, this will not go ahead because it was a pilot project. So it's within the budget process.
Pretty clear, yes. It's pretty obvious that we got to approve it for it to go forward. Okay, speakers to any of the reports? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Flagel, seconder. Councillor Murray, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great evening.